local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, November the 16th. Good morning. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, 2 degrees. It's 1 degree in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news right now. Rescue crews in BC will spend the day combing mudslide debris for anyone who may have become trapped when rocks and dirt rolled over a major highway during a torrential downpour. The historic rainfall also prompted the evacuation of an entire community. Our Jamie Pulfer joins us with the latest on the emergency situation.
The impact of climate change on full frightening display in BC. More than a month's worth of rain falling in just a few days, triggering floods and mudslides taking over highways. Crews with Canada Task Force 1 will search those areas today.
And probe for any vehicles that are trapped underneath the debris, which will be a recovery operation, sadly.
Military helicopters have rescued hundreds of people stuck on Highway 7 near Agassiz, trapped between two mudslides. Erica Schuler was among those flown out last night.
I was running towards the helicopter and I was told I had to slow down a little bit just to be safe.
Flooding has forced the evacuation of an entire community in the BC interior. 7,000 residents from the city of Merritt forced to leave after the wastewater treatment plant was wiped out. They were also forced out a few months ago due to wildfires. Jamie Pulfer, City News.
Now, our region is under a special weather statement. We're in line for a snowy tomorrow morning, along with some potential freezing rain. With more on your forecast, here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud today before we get into that wet weather for tomorrow, that mixed precipitation. Our high today near 3 degrees. We'll have the wind out of the west-northwest tonight, partly cloudy and light wind, and a low -6. For today, the high +3.
City News time is 9:02. You may finally stop getting those annoying spam robocalls on your phone, or at least not get them as often. Phone companies are being mandated by the CRTC to crack down on the issue. City News reporter Saif Kaiser is on the story and joins us now with details.
Canada's phone companies have until November 30th to put in place new technology to validate a person's identity. That's because a lot of these robocalls will actually spoof a number local to you and try to trick you into answering. So these new steps would give you the ability to figure out if a caller is legit or if it's being spoofed and is probably one of those annoying fake robocalls, something like claiming they're from the CRA and that you owe them an obscene amount of money. The CRTC says around 1/4 of all calls on Canadian networks are robocalls, and it aims to stop that. It's mandating these new rules to force these phone companies to crack down on the issue. Saif Kaiser, City News.
Now, with only 7 trains running on the Confederation line and ridership confidence still low, the Transit Commission will vote tomorrow on whether to implement free transit for the month of December. Community groups are calling on committee members to vote for an overall fare freeze for monthly and daily passes, saying that making the line more unaffordable doesn't actually help with confidence. But what many say will actually build confidence is a functioning system. And it's only been a few days of partial service, but so far so good, according to reports. And Transit Commission Chair Allan Hubley will join the Rob Snow Show a little bit later this hour, 9:15, to discuss the plan to get all 17 trains back on the track. And one person had to be rescued from their vehicle after a collision last night in Kanata. The crash took place at Robertson and Eagleson Roads shortly before 11 o'clock. Ottawa firefighters learned a person may have been trapped in their vehicle while en route to the scene and called in the extrication team. It took crews 12 minutes to free the person. Once out of the vehicle, they were handed over to the care of paramedics. I'm Chris Curries for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
it's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
You know, even after all of these years after the ice storm, the 2 weather words I hate hearing the most are freezing rain. Freezing rain. I hate hearing that in the weather forecast, but still it doesn't compare with what they're facing on the West Coast. 2 more words that I'm going to have to add to my weather vocabulary. Atmospheric river. You ever heard of that? Atmospheric river. I have to admit, I'd never heard that until this week. And this is epic storm that has caused so much destruction in parts of British Columbia called an atmospheric river. I mean, Vancouver yesterday, for the entire 24-hour period, Vancouver had 48 millimeters of rain, a lot of rain. 52 millimeters the day before, 20 millimeters the day before that. I mean, the heavens have opened up and it just hasn't stopped. Abbotsford has had something like 180 millimeters of rain in the last 2.5 days or so. 225 millimeters of rain measured in Hope, BC since Saturday. 250 millimeters of rain, Eastern Fraser Valley, and Merritt, British Columbia. Merritt, British Columbia, that is a town with a population of a little more than 7,000 people. Okay, I grew up in a town that size, a little more than 7,000 people. A little bigger than a town like Almont. They ordered everyone to evacuate yesterday. Everyone. 7,000 people. Take whatever you can and get out of town. The whole town. My wife lived on the West Coast for a very long time. She described it to me yesterday, Merritt, British Columbia, just kind of the geography of the place. Merritt is like being the plug at the bottom of the bathtub. Like everything just flows right down there into Merritt. It's terrible. There are still people trapped in vehicles on highways. I mean, major highways. Totally closed down because of mudslides. And I mean, it's not the warmest time of year to be trapped in a car on a highway at night. My gosh, wishing everyone the best out there dealing with that. They have had a terrible year when it comes to extreme weather, no doubt about that. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show. This is City News. We are all out nonstop between now and noon. We're covering all kinds of developing news stories. Locally here, there's a meeting of the Transit Commission tomorrow, so we're going to get you ready for that. Today, we'll be joined by the chair of the Transit Commission, Allan Hubley, the city councillor for Kanata South. There's always lots in the mix on the transit file in this city. You know that. Light rail is the local story in this town. It has been the local story for the better part of the last 2 months, for the better part of the last 2 years. Light rail back up and running for a few days now. Knock on wood. It'll stay that way without any issues. But still just 7 trains. We'll get the latest on the plan for a full return to service. There's free. This is where I use my air quotes, right? Free transit service for the month of December. The fuel that goes in the vehicles, not free. The people who maintain the vehicles, not working for free. The people who operate the vehicles, not operating them for free. And yet, free transit. Yeah, sure, it's free. Free for who? R1 replacement buses. Only run during the peak periods. So what happens if the train breaks down in the middle of the day? There are some who think, and it's hard to disagree with them, that R1 bus service should be on standby all the time, given the reliability with this train system. But a few dozen members of the Amalgamated Transit Union off the job, not fully vaccinated. Find out how that could impact transit service. All of it from Councillor Hubley coming up here on the Rob Snow Show. The professor is back, the poor professor from the Glebe, Ian Lee, professor of management at Carleton University, Sprott School of Business. What's in focus for us today? Inflation. Oh, wait till that number comes out. It'll be out this time tomorrow. It'll be a red-hot news story this time tomorrow. The inflation rate comes out tomorrow morning for Canada. From Statistics Canada, the consensus from the economists is for the inflation rate to hit 4.7%. Year over year, 4.7%. Now, the last time we saw the inflation reading, it was an 18-year high of 4.4%. And again, the consensus is for a reading of 4.7. It's been on a tear since the spring. They say tomorrow's number is likely to be a little on the hotter side because of higher energy prices. When these readings come out, you have to always remember it's not what the inflation rate is for today, it's what it was in October. And now it's the middle of November. And oil prices were higher in October. Gas prices were higher in October than they were in September. The big question is, how long is it going to last? What does it mean for our cost of living? What does it mean for interest rates? What does it mean for mortgage rates? Can higher interest rates even fix this sort of inflation problem? That's what a lot of economists are struggling with right now. Can higher interest rates even fix this sort of inflation problem if inflation, as the central banks continue to insist, if this inflation is related to supply chain issues because of the pandemic? If it's a semiconductor shortage out of China or Taiwan, if it's because of a factory that is closed in China because China has a zero COVID policy, if it's because COVID is a big problem in Vietnam, where there's a lot of textile manufacturing, or a strike at John Deere in the United States, or a strike at a Cargill meat processing plant. What can the Bank of Canada raising interest rates do about any of that? If these are the events that are causing higher prices and the higher consumer price index and the higher cost of living for all of it, what is the Bank of Canada raising interest rates? What's that going to solve? I mean, that's the $1 trillion question right there. And another one is, when is it going to start showing up in wages? That was my Snow and 60 commentary this morning here on CityNews and over on Shea 106. That's what economists are really going to be watching for. Will there come a time when these higher prices eventually result in higher wages, wage inflation? Jerry Dias has been on the record now, the head of Unifor, saying 2% raises not going to cut it for Unifor members. Not going to cut it for my members. That's the largest private sector union in the country. What was the hot topic on our phone lines yesterday? Bill 124. And the heck that Doug Ford's government is getting for that wage cap bill here in Ontario that has the nurses so upset. 4.4% inflation, 4.7% inflation, whatever it is. It's not 1%. And yet for our nurses and, gosh, it must be hundreds of thousands of other government workers in Ontario under that bill, that's what they get, a 1% raise. Wage inflation. It'll be a big story to watch in the coming months. And open revolt. Open revolt in the Conservative Party. Open revolt. Senator Denise Batters, from Saskatchewan, Harper appointee to the upper chamber, throwing haymaker after haymaker against the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, Justin Trudeau. No, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Erin O'Toole, the embattled one himself. He has to go, according to this senator. And she is not alone in thinking that. This is according to news reports, a coordinated effort by Conservative members of Parliament, Conservative senators, Conservative riding associations. Erin O'Toole, he can't beat Justin Trudeau. He'll never beat Justin Trudeau, they say. He has betrayed the Conservative Party of Canada, she says, and they say, by pretending to be true blue and then running an election campaign that was not conservative in any conceivable way. It was indistinguishable from the campaign put on by Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, she says, and they say. And he has, for all of that and the election result, he has got to go. within 6 months. Leadership review, kick the guy out, find someone new. Oh, we're going to get into this. You bet we are. Coming up. He's here every Tuesday morning. Columnist, National Post, and many other publications. He worked for Stephen Harper as a speechwriter. Michael Taube will join us with his take on the turmoil that continues to engulf the official opposition. You know, you have to give it to the Conservatives these days. Whether it's Conservatives here in Ottawa or Conservatives in Alberta, they sure know how to make it look easy for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, don't they? The federal Conservatives spend yet another news cycle sniping at one another. Meantime, Jason Kenney is there to announce a big child care deal with Mr. Trudeau, just as members of his party, the United Conservative Party, just as they announced they've signed up enough people to start the process of showing Jason Kenney the door. And Mr. Trudeau, how does he spend the day? Oh, he spins a yarn about making life more affordable for Canadian families, and then gets his picture taken with the Canadian men's soccer team. The way Conservatives are managing their own affairs these days, the Prime Minister barely has to break a sweat. I want to get into these Conservative woes with you again today when we do the Talkback Hour this morning, which we do every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. An hour of opinions, an hour of phone calls, the hottest hour of talk radio in town at 750-1310. An appeal to the true blue faithful out there, the Conservative faithful. Who should lead your party into the next election? Should it be Erin O'Toole or someone else? And if your answer is someone else, who is someone else? 750-1310 after the 10 o'clock news on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic, probably more. I'd have to do the math but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
Keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
He is the chair of the Transit Commission, Kanata South, Councillor Allan Hubley. Good morning, Councillor.
Good morning, Rob.
What is on the agenda for tomorrow? What will you be going over tomorrow at the Transit Commission?
Well, the main thing tomorrow will be the budget. We have the budget that was tabled at the first of the month, and tomorrow's when the Commission gets to ask all the questions and suggest any changes, and away we go. Okay. Hopefully approve it and send it to Council.
All right, so what do you want to know about the budget?
What do I want to know about
What do you want to ask about the budget, then?
Oh, well, I get to ask all my questions already as to councillors so that we can be prepared for tomorrow. So right. I've got my answers. It's going to be a tough budget year for us because the forecasting is a challenge because of COVID and the impacts locally to COVID. But I think staff.
Well, I guess what I would want to know, if I was going to show up at your Transit Commission meeting and ask questions about the budget, is how realistic are the aspirations of this budget? It seems to be based on ridership being north of 80% sometime next year, which seems optimistic at best, Councillor Hubley. How can you base a budget on an unrealistic ridership figure like that? How would you respond to that?
Well, they had to pick a number to work the budget. They had to pick a number that could be achieved. It is, I agree with you, it's an optimistic number. Mm-hmm. But, Rob, I also look at it as if the federal government decides, and this is the big thing for us, putting the budget together, we didn't know what the federal government was going to do with their workers. There were some stories that they weren't going to be sending people back to work at all. If that was the case, that would be devastating for the transit system and the budget that funds the transit system. What we're hearing now is there's going to be a partial to return to work, and that it'll escalate as if no issues happen as the year progresses. So it's reasonable to think then that we will get into the higher percentage of the ridership back once we have the public servants.
Right, but you're not confident that the number that's in the budget for ridership, the prediction for ridership north of 80%, you're not confident in that number, are you? You don't think you're going to meet that number, do you?
Oh, well, just as I explained, only if we get the public servants back and the students, because that's the bulk of our riders. A lot of the students are already coming back into the system. So, we know going into next year that Ottawa is, 90% vaccinated and still climbing. Yes. So it's reasonable to expect that next year will be a lot better than this year was. And this year was better than last year, the first year of COVID. So I understand where they're at. But, Rob, the questions I asked around that number was, what if we don't achieve that? What's the plan for that? And staff have a really good plan. It's close to what we did last year. If you remember, we had option A, B, and C. Yeah. So if we're not achieving the numbers, there's certain cuts and deferments that we can make that will help make up some of the shortfall. If it's really bad, like, if the Prime Minister comes out tomorrow and says, I'm just going to pay all the public servants to stay home and forget about going back to work, well, then, we know what that means. And that means cuts and all kinds of changes to the system, because the municipal taxpayer cannot fund that if there's nobody riding it.
All right. Okay. The Commission will get an update tomorrow on the back-to-service plan, I'm assuming, right? Full service for LRT, is that correct?
There'll be an update at the start of the meeting. It won't be a big update like we typically do because we just did the technical briefing about where we're at, like the TRA group came in and told us about the return to service. We're still in early days of return to service, so I don't see a really long update in advance of the budget. I think it'll be brief with just any new information.
And the timeline again for a full return to service is the end of the month, is that right? Okay, and you're confident that that is on track right now? Councillor?
Well, yes, I am. The testing is going well. We saw that last week, that they were able to sustain the service. So we felt comfortable enough putting people back on the trains. And we know that the testing continues and that more trains are in the queue to be approved for service. And so I can see it with the number of days left in the month. I think they can get us up to a good number of trains for December. I'm not going to pick a number off the top of my head, but...
Sorry, Councillor. There are some questions about why R1 bus service wouldn't be on standby all day, but it's only on standby during peak periods. Why is that?
Because nobody's riding it, one. Two, it's not needed. If the trains are running, and we can quickly, like within the hour, implement it if something was to go wrong with the trains. What we heard over and over during the shutdown was that people did not like that R1. So they're not going, very few people would choose R1 over getting on the train. It's going to be a longer trip. They don't like it. So we're scaling back to the point, like I want to get R1 off of the road as soon as possible because those buses had to be taken from other routes and trips all around the city. And I hear from councillors all the time that, we need to get those buses back into our neighborhoods. So we're trying to do that as fast as we can. So I would look to see R1 basically finished any time now. Okay.
Why is a fare hike necessary next year?
Well, the fare hike, Rob, is based on the long-term financial plan. That's how much increase we need in order to pay for the long-term plans, which is, buying new buses, retrofitting our buildings, all that kind of stuff. Cost of living, like, we have a 5-year contract with our staffers, which is great. It brings stability to the organization, but it also means that there's a raise for the workers every year. And so you have to have new revenues coming in to pay for that. And that's the big issue with the freezing the fares and everything. You have to account for the impact on the long-term financial plan.
Okay. Councillor McKenney has a motion for the Transit Commission, whereas the City of Ottawa's current transit funding model requires transit users pay 55% of the cost of transit in what we used to call the fare box, 55%. Right. General property tax revenues pay the rest. Be it resolved, Council direct the Mayor and Transit Commission Chair, that's you, write to the federal government requesting operational funding through the federal gas tax or other channels to reduce the user share of the cost of public transit so we can reduce or eliminate user fees and encourage more transit use. How would you vote on that motion?
I would support the writing of the letter and the sending of the letter.
Okay.
It's the only way. We know we have a percentage of councillors and citizens in the city, it's not just the councillors, that would like to see us move towards free transit or something close to that. Nothing's free, so I prefer the term no charge because, the taxpayer is paying. Every dollar that's taken off of the fare, the taxpayer is going to be paying more money towards transit. So I get what they want to try to do. This is the best way to approach that, so I appreciate that she's taking this path, because I've heard your show often, and there's a lot of money being printed at the federal level. If they want to send some of that money this way to go directly towards transit to bring the fares down, that's how we can drop the fares. But we can't put it on the back of the municipal taxpayer.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Good to hear from you. Yep. Councillor Allan Hubley is the chair of the Transit Commission with a meeting tomorrow. The news is coming up, and then Professor Ian Lee from Carleton on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, November the 16th. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, it's 2 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 1. Here's what's making news right now. Ottawa, Smiths Falls, and the Valley saw a dusting of snow yesterday, but that was likely the appetizer for tomorrow, where we could see some messy commutes. Forecasters predicting a mix of snow and freezing rain. A special weather statement from Environment Canada is in effect, calling for about 5 centimeters of snow tomorrow morning, followed by periods of freezing rain. Provincial police out doing ride checks last night, and they say it's good news to report there were no issues. OPP and Russell say they performed over 200 ride checks, and they say all drivers were compliant. A driver stopped for speeding on Blackburn Hamlet bypass, and during a search, police found open alcohol in the vehicle. A breathalyzer found a sample in the Warren range. But what officers also found was that the driver had a previous impaired driving conviction and had been suspended from driving in Ontario since 2003. Multiple charges were laid and the vehicle was seized for 45 days. And a trivia fundraiser for the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa raised some big bucks. Over 800 participants took part in the virtual event for children, youth and families on Friday night. The event, with Ottawa Trivia League quizmaster Paul Paquet, raised $53,000. For the third year in a row, the team named La Triviata took home the trophy. City News time is 9:33. I'm Chris Curries. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Hey, Professor Ian Lee is back from the Sprott School at Carleton University. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Robert.
Well, the inflation rate is going to be released tomorrow by Statistics Canada at 8:30, and the consensus from economists is for inflation to show year-over-year increases of 4.7%.
Yeah.
After a reading last time around of 4.4%. I would like to ask you, we hear from the central banks. They're convinced that this recent inflation trend is transitory. It's a one-off. Okay, right. It's mostly related to supply chain problems caused by the pandemic. Is that an assessment that you agree with that? Do you think that that's pretty much the appropriate assessment from say Tiff Macklem, for example, from the Bank of Canada?
Yes and no, and I'm not sitting on the fence on this. Let me explain.
Okay.
I do agree that it is initially, and that's the critical word, initially, it's transitory. What do I mean by that? Well, the pandemic came along, we locked everybody down, we blew up the supply chains, basically that's what we did. It was an unintended consequence. I'm not blaming anybody of malice. It wasn't, we never even thought about it. We just said, hey, we got to stop this thing from spreading. Everybody go home, except for a few industries that got designated as absolutely essential. Mm-hmm. And so we completely, and it wasn't just Canada, it was other countries too, we disrupted the supply chains, which were very tightly calibrated over the last 10, 15 years as we got better and better and more efficient at squeezing costs out of the system, reducing excess inventory sitting around, which is very costly and drives up prices. And us Canadians, lots of people around the world don't like paying higher prices if they can pay lower prices for the same product. So we optimized the supply chains, made them really tight, just-in-time inventory systems,
right.
No slack in the system, basically, very tight, very efficient.
Very efficient,
tight.
Yeah.
Along comes pandemic, blows it up. Okay, and shortages, and notwithstanding when we get to talking about housing, anytime you have a shortage of anything, I don't care if it's salt or sugar or coffee or chips in a car or, oh my goodness, houses, guess what happens? The price goes up if there's a shortage, meaning there's more demand than there is supply. So that came along. And so, yes, Rosenberg's correct. It's transitory. Yes, Tiff Macklem is correct. It's transitory, meaning the supply chain will come back into balance when the pandemic runs its course, which it will. I believe it will. The fly in the ointment, though, Rob, is they're not telling, because I think that's what they believe, and so they're forgetting the other part of the story.
Okay.
And I say forgetting because economists have talked about this for, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. That inflation is a lot about expectations. So I don't dispute what he's saying. The supply chains will come back into balance. I don't dispute that the pandemic is going to run its course. It's not going to stay here forever. Pandemics run their course. I get it. What he is neglecting or ignoring is us, our heads. Millions of us, not you and I, us. How about 30 million of us? The people that go and buy things. Everything as trivial as going and buying a coffee at a coffee shop, to buying a car, to buying a house, to doing a renovation. All of us. And the same in the States. All the people basically over the age of 18 who have jobs, who spend money, they're part of the market or markets. And if we, all of us, start to think that inflation, which the central banks say is temporary, if we start to think, you know what, I don't really agree with him. I can think whatever I want to think. I, consumer, Joe consumer.
Yes.
And if I think, and millions of others think like I think, that it isn't temporary, that it is going to become embedded.
And what's the risk of that? What's the risk of that?
Well, I lived through it in the 70s, and I want to say this very respectfully, because Tiff Macklem, believe me, is a very bright guy.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
He's got a PhD from Western. People can say that doesn't mean anything. Well, I think it does. I'm impressed by that. A PhD in economics. It's a very strong program, and he's got unbelievable oodles, 35 years of oodles of experience. My joke is he got bored every 4 years. He'd work at the Bank of Canada, then he'd get bored, go over to the Finance Canada, worked there for 4 years, got bored, walked over the 4 blocks from Finance Canada over to Bank Canada.
Well, he spent some time in academia, too, at McGill.
Yeah, the guy, there's no question about his intellect. Let's be very clear. No question about his experience.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I don't what we have learned, and I'm a huge NFL fan, okay? I'm not changing the subject. Okay. There have been all these upsets this year, and I'm watching these really experienced NFL players who are Hall of Famers, who are superstars in their own right, and they eat and live this. This is their job, and they're sitting there saying, no way, the Tampa Bay is going to be defeated by Washington because it's a podunk team in last place. So what does Washington do? Beats Tampa Bay. Last night, what happened? LA was absolutely preordained to win. What happened? They lost. So my point is, even experts can be wrong.
Sure. Any given Sunday. Any given Sunday.
And so what I'm saying is, Governor Macklem, notwithstanding his extraordinary intelligence and experience and education, is making a judgment, a speculation, we all are, about the future of what's in our heads, all of us. Well, I'm not so sure that anybody knows what's in our collective 30 million heads in Canada, let alone the 150 or 200 million heads in the United States.
I guess my question would be, the traditional remedy to inflation would be higher interest rates,
That's right?
Higher interest rates.
Yeah.
But if this inflation is caused, as I said in my opening remarks, because Xi orders factories to close in China because they're infected with COVID.
Yeah.
Or Vietnam is having problems with COVID, and that's where so much of the clothing is made for the Western world. Or John Deere goes on strike in the United States. Or a big meat plant has a COVID outbreak and it has to close. And the semiconductor shortage, and on and on and on we could go, right?
Yeah.
What is raising interest rates going to do about that? How effective would that be?
Oh, it's very effective. I lived through it. I know. And
but how would higher interest rates?
Oh, I'll explain why. I'll explain why. And it's, by the way,
cure what ails the supply chain.
Great, Rob, it's not theory. I mean, yes, it is theory, but it's also reality.
Okay.
The textbooks teach us. And by the way, we're focusing unfairly only on interest rates. It also works with fiscal policy because both an interest rate increase or a tax increase is what's called a withdrawal from the flow. That's just a fancy word of saying it's the opposite of stimulus. Stimulus injects money into the economy that wasn't there before, and you do that, or you cut interest rates, which is a form of stimulus. It's called.
So you're saying you're going to reduce demand.
So what you're doing is you're sucking money out of the economy like a vacuum cleaner. When you raise interest rates or put taxes up, you are taking money out of the economy that people can no longer spend on restaurants, cars, renovations, trips, you name it. In other words, you are deflating the economy a bit. So when somebody says, well, interest rates don't work, oh yeah? Go back to 1980. Paul Volcker was asked, how far are you going to shove up the interest rate? He says, as far as I have to go until inflation is killed.
Yeah.
He drove it to 20%, and let me tell you, I was through that. I lived through that.
August 1981, I looked it up this morning. August 1981, the Bank of Canada overnight rate, which is 0.25 right now, August of 1981 was 20.78%.
Yep. And so if anyone, I'm not saying we're going to 20.8. Okay, I'm not saying that. Okay, let's be clear. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is this. Anyone who denies that raising interest rates doesn't deflate the economy, you aren't thinking. I didn't say 1% or 1/4% increase. I'm not even predicting an amount, a rate. And say this, drive it up high enough, and you can have a good rip-roaring recession, and you'll squeeze inflation. You can have negative inflation, deflation, because it's taking money out of your pocket. Just like a tax increase takes money out of your pocket, so you can't spend it. And so that
would reduce demand, which would ease pressure on the supply chain. Which
less people, less money chasing scarce goods.
Okay, interesting.
Because you've taken away their ability to go and chase those shortage of goods because you've taken money out. You've really hurt them, of course, but it works.
Interesting. Okay. So lots of headlines recently that Canada's in a housing bubble. Which I don't know. Gosh, anybody who's bet against housing's been wrong for 15 years in Canada. I mean, it's like they've been predicting a big bubble in Canada's housing market for at least since the financial crisis anyway.
Yeah.
Kelly McParland has a column about that today. CBC recently reported on the hot housing market. The Financial Post says we have the second frothiest housing market in the world. UBS, the big Swiss bank, says we have the second biggest property bubble in the world. Is it a bubble in your opinion? Do we have a housing bubble in your opinion?
No, I think we have a housing shortage.
A housing shortage, okay.
Let me, what's amazing about this topic, and I've been, I'm a former mortgage manager. I had millions of dollars. Believe me, I did.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I had a great time. I was in my 20s. Footloose, fancy-free, and, the world was a beach. When you're in your 20s, the world is a beach, right? Because everything is wonderful and all the time, and life is just wonderful. But where I'm going with this is I've been following the mortgage market and housing ever since because I spent, 8-9 years of my life doing that before I went back to school. And I'm mystified by progressives, and it's mostly progressives doing this because I do read the op-eds of the various media, and I know who's writing them, and I know where they're coming from because you can see the arguments. And, nobody denies that if, there's a shortage of computer chips for cars, that the price of cars is going to go up. Mm-hmm. Or if there's a shortage of oil, the price of oil is going to go up. Or a shortage of blueberries because of a frost in the crops in Central America, the price of blueberries goes up. Everybody understands there's a shortage of anything, the price goes up. And yet, on housing, you get these amazing op-eds. They're just pure alternate reality Disneyland, where they're saying, oh, no, it has nothing to do with housing shortages. It's the foreigners, they're coming in and driving it up, all 2% of them. Or they come up with the most wild-eyed ideas. There's a shortage of houses, people. Now, let me go further, Rob, and I don't want to be misinterpreted in this.
I don't think you will be.
I strongly support immigration.
I know.
Okay?
Yeah.
But, we're bringing in one new Ottawa every 3 years, and that number is going up. We're going to go...
Well, I mean, this last year and a half, you can't say that the run-up in housing prices has anything to do with immigration because there's been next to no immigration.
No, but it's the aggregate demand in the economy and the aggregate supply in the economy.
Right.
And there's more people that want to buy a house than want to sell the house.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not rocket science, people. Okay. This is not, sorry about the progressives, you're wrong. There's a shortage of houses. And so what do people do when there's a shortage of houses? And you really want a house. You bid it up. You say, well, I'm going to beat the other guy. I'm going to offer more money. That's exactly what's going on. And so that's why Mr. Trudeau, in the last election, realized this was a very hot button issue and ran to the front of the line, as he's good at doing, promised to do something. But, Rob, here's where it gets really interesting. I have been arguing consistently for 5 or 6 years or longer that there's multiple reasons why there's a shortage. But the single largest explanation, is because in the biggest cities across Canada, I'm talking the GTA, of course, I'm talking Vancouver.
Zoning,
and
restrictive
Ottawa.
Zoning, right? Restrictive zoning. Yeah.
Municipalities have deliberately restricted the supply. I'm not even getting into zoning. The zoning rules have been there since the beginning of time. People say it's NIMBY. NIMBY has been there as long as human beings exist.
Right.
What's happened in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the biggest cities is that the councils have become very progressive, and they hate cars, many of them, and they've used urban sprawl to argue that the suburbs are responsible for our climate crisis, because we have declared a climate crisis, remember that?
Climate emergency.
And they have convinced a lot of people, including themselves, that the climate crisis can be solved by restricting the suburban growth, because they have told everybody it's because of those bad people out in the suburbs, they have to drive farther and more miles. The irony is, as an op-ed in the Globe by a progressive environmentalist only about a month ago in the Globe noted, emissions per person are highly correlated to income. The more money you make, the more you consume, the more you spend. And so people with the biggest GHG emissions footprint are the people with the highest incomes. Oh, where do they live? In the urban core, in the wealthiest postal codes. That's the glebe. Yeah. That's Sandy Hill. That's Rockcliffe. That's down by Ottawa U. It's the urban core, and that you drive through the glebe, and there's lots of houses. Yes, they got a Tesla out front, $100,000 Tesla, but they got the 2 other cars out front, too. And they're sitting in monster homes. And so my point is that they were able to pull off this claim that the suburbs were responsible.
Yeah.
They limited the urban growth, and we're not building enough houses as a
It's a housing it's not a housing bubble, it's a housing shortage. Build more houses.
Exactly.
Okay, we're going to stop here. When we come back, what's going on? All these conglomerates are breaking up. General Electric and Johnson & Johnson. What's going on with that? This broke a week ago when we were on the air together. That General Electric would break up into 3 different companies. We will ask Professor Lee when we come back. He's with the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University, and this is City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned. We have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. At that time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, you know, especially with the virus going on. Like, did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, you know, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You know, you can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was like thought it's gonna be like this. You know, earthquake might happen. We joke about it before. Things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive? That's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, you know? And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can go online, let's say t-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, like it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at a certain time, so I'm glad to do that.
Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Professor Ian Lee is back. It was a week ago today. We were actually on the air when the news broke. General Electric, the old GE, no more. It's splitting itself up into 3 companies, an aviation company, an energy company, and a healthcare company. Toshiba, big conglomerate, going to do the same thing. Johnson & Johnson going to break itself up into consumer products and pharmaceuticals and a medical device business, all in separate companies. So what's going on? Why are they doing this?
You don't mind me being a little bit academic right now?
Wonk out. Yes,
okay,
go ahead.
I'm going to. I've been teaching this for 30 years, and not because I'm brilliant or clairvoyant. It's because I learned at the feet of the great Michael Porter, the world guru, strategy professor at Harvard Business School.
Okay.
He did his PhD in economics, studied American industry for 40 years, roughly 1945 to 1985, and studied it for a whole bunch real companies, huge companies. And he studied it, and one of the multiple questions he was asking is, are conglomerates, the technical term is firms that are diversified into unrelated industries, they're not related, for whatever reason. He says, do they do better than firms that are focused on one industry and that's all they do, but they're really good at it? And the conventional wisdom from the time of literally John D. Rockefeller I and the robber barons of the late 1880s until the mid-1980s, 100 years, was that, you diversify into other industries, protect your risk. One industry's going up, another one's going down.
Yeah.
And that was the belief in corporate strategy. We are discussing corporate strategy right now, not business strategy. And that was the belief. And you diversify and you become a big conglomerate. And Porter completely blew that thing, no, pardon my language, he just blew it to hell and gone. And what he found was firms that are diversified into unrelated businesses do less well. In fact, some do horribly. And they destroy value. They don't create value. And Porter and I have been arguing, and many others, the purpose of firms is not to make money, not to make a profit. It's to create something of value. Call it an iPhone. Call it groceries at Loblaws. Now, if you're really good at creating value, then yes, your market share will go up, your profitability will go up, and the share price will go up, and the owners will become wealthier. But that's the outcome of successful value creation. It's not the purpose of the firm. And there's lots of professors who don't understand that, and there's lots of activists who don't understand that. The purpose of firm is to create something of value that consumers or buyers want to buy. So these firms resisted. Most of the firms, by the way, as Porter's research diffused, because he's famous, he's at Harvard Business School, it diffused into the capital markets, the Wall Street and Toronto stock exchanges and so forth. And because people realized, gee whiz, if these companies are destroying value, I, clever investment banker at Goldman Sachs, I should be driving down the share price of these companies that are destroying value because they're not as good an investment. So from the mid-'80s until now, most companies deconglomeratized. Sorry for the ugly phrase. They de-diversified. They sold off unrelated businesses to focus on their core business, their core competencies. Everybody's heard that phrase. There were a few holdouts. One of them was Toshiba. Another, the biggest of all, was GE. And every year I taught this, I'd always have a student, Professor, but what about General Electric? I said, they're the outlier. They're the bad guys. And they should de-diversify. They should get rid of all those unrelated businesses.
So you think it's a right decision that they're doing?
Oh, it's long overdue, like 30 years overdue.
Right.
30 years
I mean, there you have Johnson & Johnson makes everything from like Q-tips to vaccines.
But it's it's not the product diversification. It's business diversification.
Yeah, well, consumer products. Say consumer products.
If you can make 100 products in the same factory, you're okay.
Right.
It's where you have different value chains. Like, let's use an obvious example. When I first went to Poland in 1991, I was astonished at all the conglomerates. Like, you'd be talking to somebody in the class, because these were business people in government corps. And, you'd say, okay, my company, they build chips. Oh, great. Do you have any other businesses? Yes, we make women's cosmetics. I said, well, wait a minute. Like, what's the synergy here between chips and cosmetics? Well, the answer is there was none. None. And so as people started to realize that, like I said, they got rid of it. So most companies are focused today, single business. They're just in pharma, or they're just in cars and so forth. But these companies were in 3 and 4 and 5 different businesses. I'll predict Walt Disney is yet to be diversify.
Yeah, maybe.
They've got cruise ships, they've got theme parks, they've got movies, and
streaming,
different businesses, different value chains. You make a movie very differently from driving a cruise ship around the Caribbean in circles.
Right. Very interesting, Professor. Okay. Thank you for this morning. It's always great, always provocative, and we'll speak again next week.
That was Intro to Corporate Strategy 101.
Okay. Worth every penny. Thank you. Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business, where he's Professor of Management, Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. So when we come back, the very latest in the drama that is engulfing the Conservative Party of Canada, and a question for you. If you are following it at all, I'd love to hear from you. Who should lead this Conservative Party into the next election? That is the question that the party itself is struggling to answer. And I'd like you to answer it for them right after the news at 750-1310. This is The Rob Snow Show on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, the 16th of November. Good morning. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, 2 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 1. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We're on day 5 of partial service for the light rail transit system, and as of now, no issues to report. So when will a full complement of trains be back on the Confederation line? Transit Chair Allan Hubley on the Rob Snow Show on if he's confident that it will be by the end of this month.
Yes, I am. The testing is going well. We saw that last week, that they were able to sustain the service. So we felt comfortable enough putting people back on the trains. And we know that the testing continues and that more trains are in the queue to be approved for service. And so I can see it with the number of days left in the month.
There are currently 7 trains running on the east-west line. City News time, 10:01. Let's take a look at your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud today before we get into that wet weather for tomorrow, that mixed precipitation. Our high today near 3 degrees. We'll have the wind out of the west-northwest tonight, partly cloudy and light wind, and a low -6. For today, the high +3.
City News time is 10:02. Citizens in Gatineau will have a new mayor and many new councillors today as the newly elected representatives are sworn in. Voters in Gatineau went to the polls on November the 7th, electing France Belle-Île as mayor, making her the first woman to hold the top job in Quebec's 4th largest city. Belle-Île's victory ends 8 years of governing by Maxime Pedneau-Jobin. He was the leader of Action Gatineau's party, and he decided not to seek re-election for a 3rd term. The swearing-in ceremony takes place this evening. A Gloucester couple are $50,000 richer after winning OLG's Instant Bingo Doubler. Leonard and Elkie Hickey say they love to play instant tickets and purchase the winning ticket at the Shoppers Drug Mart on Ogilvie Road in Gloucester. The couple already has plans for the winning, saying they want to complete some home renos, buy a new computer, and share some with their children. Pfizer has signed a deal with a UN-backed group to allow other manufacturers to make its experimental COVID-19 pill. Reporter Charles de Ledesma says under the terms of the agreement, Pfizer will not receive royalties on sales in low-income countries.
The manufacturer will also waive royalties on sales in all countries covered by the agreement while COVID-19 remains a public health emergency. Earlier this month, Pfizer said its pill cut the risk of hospitalization and death by nearly 90% in people with mild to moderate coronavirus infections. Independent experts recommended halting the company's study based on its promising results.
Britain authorized a COVID-19 pill made by Merck earlier this month. It is pending approval elsewhere. And the Blue Jays making a big splash in baseball's off-season this morning. It appears their ace will be around for a long time. Here's Simon Bennett with the latest.
The Blue Jays have liked what they've seen from Jose Barrios since he arrived in July, and Barrios clearly likes Toronto. Multiple reports have him signing a 7-year extension with the club worth around $131 million. Barrios was acquired midway through the season. The trade actually happening on July 30th, the day the Jays finally returned to Rogers Center. Experts raving about the extension. Analyst Jim Bowden.
He's got a great arm, knows how to pitch, and if I'm the Blue Jays, you know, when I've got a 27-year-old starter like that, that's what I want to build around.
The question now, can the Jays retain free agents Robbie Ray and or Marcus Semien? And can any moves happen by December 1st? If the current collective bargaining agreement can't be reached by then, off-season business comes to a halt. I'm Simon Bennett.
And I'm Chris Curries. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election? I know the last election wasn't even 2 months ago, but it's never too early to talk about the next one. If I was Prime Minister Trudeau looking at these Conservatives, I'd call the election right now. You win a massive, massive Liberal majority government. But who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election? Aaron O'Toole or someone else? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. And my follow-up question. If it is someone else, give me a name. Give me a name. Who should lead the Conservative Party of Canada into the next election, Aaron O'Toole or someone else? And if it's not Aaron O'Toole, who should that person be? You must have somebody in mind. If you want to get rid of O'Toole, you must have somebody in mind. Open revolt. Open revolt. That is the headline this morning. That's how it's being described this morning in the political media in Canada. There is open revolt in the Conservative ranks. Some Conservatives on Parliament Hill, they want to stab the party leader in the back. Heck, forget about the back. They'll stab him while they're staring at him right in the face. Denise Batters is a Conservative senator. She was appointed to the Senate by Stephen Harper, and she took to social media yesterday to announce that she is calling for a leadership review of Aaron O'Toole to be held within 6 months. And we're going to play it for you here. It's a little on the other side of 2 minutes long. And she rhymed off all kinds of reasons why she thinks Aaron O'Toole is unfit to be the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Should we play that now? Yeah, let's play it now. Just to set the stage. Okay. Leading the revolt. Conservative Senator from Saskatchewan, Denise Batters. Roll tape, David.
I'm Senator Denise Batters, and I'm launching a petition so that our party members can have their say on the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. I've been a Conservative my whole life. I came from the PC side of the party, and like so many others, I worked hard to help merge the Canadian Alliance and the PC parties into our winning Conservative Party movement. On behalf of Conservative activists and members from coast to coast, we started this petition because we don't want to see this party ripped apart again. When we're divided, the Liberals win. Under Aaron O'Toole's leadership, the rift in our party is growing. He told us this is not your grandfather's Conservative Party and warned campaigning MPs they must agree 100% with his new direction, which constantly changes, or get out of caucus. As leader, Mr. O'Toole has watered down and even entirely reversed our policy positions without the input of party or caucus members. On carbon tax, on guns, on conscience rights. He flip-flopped on our policies within the same week, the same day, and even within the same sentence. He won the leadership claiming to be true blue, but ran an election campaign nearly indistinguishable from Trudeau's Liberals. We can't afford more of the same. Aaron O'Toole lost this election by every measure. Our party lost 500,000 votes, claimed fewer seats and a lower popular vote than in 2019. We lost diverse seats and MPs in the GTA, Alberta, and in Vancouver suburbs. Mr. O'Toole's inability to communicate or connect with female voters left us with an even wider gender gap. Aaron O'Toole lost a trust election to Justin Trudeau, of all people. This campaign was not lost because of Mr. O'Toole's mistakes or inexperience. It was lost because of what Canadian voters perceive as his character flaw, that he is not trustworthy. You can't come back from that.
Can't come back.
Aaron O'Toole lectured our party members on election night, telling us we need to have the courage to change. Into what, he hasn't yet said. But members deserve to have a say on this change and the future direction of this party, including our leadership. Fellow Conservative Party members, join me in signing this petition and make your voice heard.
All right, so that is one haymaker after another, right? He's not a true... That's Senator Batters yesterday, like laying it down, the smackdown. He's not a true blue Conservative. He didn't consult anyone before flip-flopping on all kinds of issues, carbon taxes, gun control, vaccine mandates, conscience rights. It's hard to know where he stands on any given issue at any time of the day because he changes his opinion more often than Justin Trudeau changes his socks. And he ran a campaign that was indistinguishable from what the Liberals were offering, and on and on. He was Trudeau light, he was Liberal light. The results speak for themselves. Right? So the Conservatives lost again, and not just that, they didn't do any better in the course of losing than they did when Andrew Scheer was the leader of this party, and Senator Batters is known to be a supporter of Mr. Scheer. She did not support Aaron O'Toole in his run for the leadership. She supported Peter MacKay. That's all in the political news today. So what do you think? The question for the morning is who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election, Aaron O'Toole or someone else. And if it's someone else, give me a name. If it's someone else, if you don't think Aaron O'Toole is fit to be the leader, then tell me someone specifically. Give me a name. Who should it be? Kirk, Ottawa. Good morning.
Hey,
you're on City News.
How are you?
I'm great, sir. I'm just, when it comes to the Conservatives, you just microwave the popcorn, sit yourself down on the couch and watch the show.
Honestly, I think O'Toole, he was all right.
He was all right?
We sort of got screwed over by the whole PPC party. I know we lost some seats. They didn't win anything, and we sort of came close to winning. But I personally think Pierre Poilievre should be...
Would you prefer, if the leader going into the next election of the Conservative Party of Canada, the leader was Pierre Poilievre instead of Aaron O'Toole?
Yeah,
you would
I'd prefer that, or I think maybe even some female, because I think that's the times, and maybe switching it up, that might give us some more seats.
Maybe. There was certainly a lot of people talking about Ronna Ambrose, for example, the last time around, that she would make for a great Conservative leader. She was
too much with it, but I know Pierre Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre. I hear that a lot. That people like Pierre Poilievre as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I think the Liberals would love to run against Pierre Poilievre as well. They'd love nothing more than that. Mark, Ottawa South. Mark.
Thank you, Rob.
Who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election, Aaron O'Toole or someone else? And if it is someone else, who is someone else?
Before I answer that question,
all right,
I would ask another. How much difference would it really make?
How much difference would it make? Why do you ask that?
Well, you see, it might be that a measure of the vibrancy of a democracy is a proportion of the total number of ridings that are swing ridings, wherein the voters take a fresh look at the performances of the party leaders since the last election and vote based on how they've done since then, and will change their vote if they're displeased with the performance of the incumbent. But how often does that happen in how much of the country? And I don't think very much. Mm-hmm. I think voters are very much set in their ways. In Liberal ridings, they'll vote Liberal when they don't like the Liberal leader. And in Conservative ridings, they'll vote Conservative even if they don't like the Conservative leader. It's hard to imagine voters in the West voting for Justin Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault. And one thing I would suggest the Conservatives do, but it flies directly in the face of the whole game of Canadian politics.
Okay.
Instead of trying to replace the Liberals, try to actually be a great opposition party, the way the NDP has at some times in history. In other words, offer alternative policies. We keep saying in Canada the word...
Well, it would be nice if they could, with the Conservative Party, if they could get on with the job of that. I think that's some of the frustration, is that this version of the Conservative Party under this leader just can't seem to get past the election result right
Well,
now.
You see, it's like many people in the media make the mistake of thinking that what might motivate a newspaper editorial board to change its endorsement will motivate the voters within the various ridings. I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
But what I mean is, if the Conservatives were to go in a radical another direction, in other words, actually condemn violation of minority rights in Quebec the same way you do in any other part of Canada, actually be open to some restrictions on late-term abortions, actually support... I forgot some of the things I was going to say.
Take a principled stand on something.
Support two-tier health care to a degree.
Right.
And
don't run on a carbon tax. Offer up a vigorous defense of the natural resources sector.
And possibly the most blasphemous of all, that reconciliation must not mean the marginalization of the majority in favor of the minority. There is a limit to Aboriginal entitlements. And if the vision was pronounced very carefully, cautiously, succinctly, and you avoid...
Yeah, well, Yeah, it's a nice thought, I guess. Can you do that in the social media environment that we're in right now?
Well, the thing that you see, this said you don't want to attract you can leave the fringe to the People's Party of Canada. But I do believe that very many Canadians really are conservative, but they've got no voice.
Okay. All right, Mark, thank you. We're a little tight on time, and phone line's filling up here. 750-1310, 750-1310, with the Conservative Party soap opera and its latest installment. Who should lead this party into the next election? Is it Aaron O'Toole or is it someone else? And if it is someone else, who is that someone else? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
To opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, where I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me, I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew that we have to wait, and we knew that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what their grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that would bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Through the hourglass. These are the days of our lives. Watching the Conservatives, it is like the soaps. I'll tell you what. My stories. Who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election? Aaron O'Toole or someone else? And if it's someone else, who is that someone else? Doug, Ottawa. Good morning. Doug, you're on City News.
Good morning.
Morning, Doug.
So personally, I think it should be Aaron O'Toole. I think it's funny looking back at when Andrew Scheer lost the election, and we were having these exact same conversations, and they blew up the party, and there was outrage. And I think it was on your show or one of the other shows that somebody from the Conservative Party was asked, oh, like, you know, it seems like there's so much animosity in the party and everyone's so divided. And their answer was, oh, well, we're all united in the desire to get rid of Trudeau. And that's what they've been running on, is this concept of not being Trudeau. Oh, vote for us. We're not Trudeau. And it's, in my opinion, clear that that's not enough. It's not enough to not be Trudeau. That's why he's won 3 elections. So I think Aaron O'Toole is on the right track. The country's, you know, leaning more towards the Liberals' platform, and he's trying to appease to that. But I think where he's had his biggest mistakes is, from my perspective, as somebody who, you know, goes into every election with an open mind. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I feel like he's been invisible, and I think that's his biggest failing. Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, he needs.
Well, yeah, and maybe in that regard, he's kind of a victim of circumstance because he won the leadership when everyone was on lockdown, right? And Mr. Trudeau had command of the media because he was doing his kind of daily 11 o'clock news conferences outside of Rideau Cottage, and it's like the whole media, especially the press gallery, is planning its whole day of coverage around what Mr. Trudeau says. You know, Trudeau says, COVID. Well, you know, so for Mr. O'Toole, you can have some sympathy for him, I suppose, that he wasn't able to gain any kind of profile, which is going to be a challenge for any opposition leader. So, some good points.
Exactly. I just think that. Yeah, I think their problem is that every election they're trying to blow up the party and go in a new direction without realizing that that's why they're losing votes, is because nobody knows what they even stand for. And like I said, being the not Trudeau party isn't enough.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the Senator Batter's video, I mean, it's just one hit after another. You know, O'Toole did this, he did that, he did this, he did that. Let's not forget about the other thing. I mean, she doesn't hold back. I think she's saying what a lot of conservatives have been thinking, not just since the election result, but even in the run-up to the election. Just what are you getting with Aaron O'Toole? Who's the real Aaron O'Toole? Would the real Aaron O'Toole please stand up? You know, he ran for the leadership telling people he was true blue. You know, would never have a carbon tax. Would defend Alberta, would talk about unfair equalization, would defend the oil and gas sector, natural resources, conscience rights, all of these things, and then just tossed it aside to run this kind of mushy, middle-of-the-road, very reddish conservative campaign, which was a turnoff for a lot of conservatives and wasn't nearly liberal enough for the true liberals. So, doomed to fail. I think that's the Batter's synopsis, right? In a nutshell? More or less in a nutshell? So here we are. I mean, it's just the idea that it's been 2 months since the election, and this is what still is haunting the conservatives. They're still busy fighting with one another. So they just can't mount any sort of challenge to anything that's coming from Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. Kate in Ottawa. Good morning, Kate.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I've voted in every municipal, provincial, and federal election since I was 18 years old. Okay. I was never a party member until Trudeau won the election. I became a card-carrying conservative. I openly, push against getting rid of Trudeau. I was apprehensive in supporting O'Toole. Okay. And I chose not to vote for him because of exactly what Denise Batters said in her video. Too much flip-flopping. Aaron O'Toole might be a really nice guy, but he's not a strong leader. I think that Pierre Poilievre would be a great option, but for whatever reason, he chose not to run last time. I hope whoever is in his corner pushes him to do it. But if that's not the case, I think that Michelle Rempel would make a great.
Okay. Michelle Rempel was the one out being the most visible defender of Aaron O'Toole yesterday. Michelle Rempel Garner, yeah.
Well, if that's the case, that's the case. But I really think as a politician, I think that she's great. Both her and Pierre Poilievre are hardcore. They don't stand back. They don't shy away from what has to be said. Pierre has taken Trudeau down many times in House of Commons. Like, it's time for Trudeau to go. And I really I really hope that Trudeau is gone in the next...
Right. You say it's time for Trudeau to go, and in order to accomplish that, by the sounds of things, you think O'Toole has to go too, right?
Yeah.
O'Toole has to go first. Right? Yeah. Okay. All right, Kate. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. I'm just going to move along here. Appreciate the call. Tommy.
Good morning, Mr.
Holy cow, I'm so glad to hear your voice. It's been so long.
How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good, Tom. I hope you're well these days. You're hanging in there?
Not bad. I'm hanging in there.
Good stuff. Now, what do you think? Should Aaron O'Toole remain as the Conservative?
Ambrose don't want the job. Pierre Poilievre, he doesn't want the job. They could have had it. They don't want it. The point is, look, O'Toole is a nice guy, but nice guys come in last. You know, he's too passive. The point is, you got to have Peter MacKay. I said that right from the beginning. I kept on saying before they ran for the...
Yes, you did.
MacKay's the guy. He could pick up a lot of votes down the Maritimes as well.
Yes, you did say that. I remember you saying that.
Yeah, Peter MacKay is the guy.
Peter MacKay's the guy. Yeah.
I tell you, all this business being nice, and stop talking about guns and abortion. Talk about the issues, the cost of living, rent, and all this stuff.
Yep.
This is what people want to hear.
Yep.
They don't want to hear about climate change. If they wanted climate change, they'd vote for the Green Party. But they don't.
Yeah, good point.
Your answer.
Yep, good point.
Canadians are interested in the
price of gas, price of groceries, price of housing, right, Tom?
Talk about... And, you know, we talk about the real issues. Never mind abortion and guns and all this crap. Talk about the thing and really give it to them. Say, I'm not interested in that. But they bring that up all the time. That's what killed Mr. Scheer as well. The same sex. What the hell is that? Nobody's interested in that.
All right, Tom.
People are going into the grocery store now. They can't even buy a piece of meat. You know, and rent is well over $1,000.
Good points, Tom. Good points, all in all. Yep. The cost of living. O'Toole was doing best during the election campaign when he was on about the cost of living, and then for some reason the cost of living disappeared. Thanks, Tom, as an issue, and 3 weeks later it was all over, and it was Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister once more. 10:28, halfway there. Rob Snow Show, talking conservative drama within the party. Open revolt in conservative circles. This is City News.
in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, November the 16th. Good morning. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, it's 1 degree, mostly cloudy skies. In Smiths Falls, it's 2. Here's what's making news this hour. A lower tally for provincial cases of COVID-19 today, only 481. That's after yesterday's 552 in a number of days, last week in the 600s. This comes with 41 new cases in Ottawa, 4 new cases in each of Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and Eastern Ontario, and no new cases in Renfrew County. This from almost 19,000 tests, which included 1 death and a positivity rate of 2.5%. The town of Smiths Falls has implemented a mandatory vaccination policy for COVID-19. The mandate approved by council last night by a majority, and it's set to go into effect in early 2022. The mayor responding to some hateful graffiti that was spray painted on the sign of the Elgin Street Courthouse yesterday morning. He said, "We must never let down our guard against all forms of hate, and this attack on the Jewish community is completely unacceptable." He then went on to encourage anyone with any information on any hate crime, or this one in particular, should contact Ottawa Police or Crime Stoppers. And a driver was stopped for speeding on Blackbird Hamlet bypass, and during a search, police found open alcohol in the vehicle. A breathalyzer found a sample in the worn range, but what officers also found was that the driver had a previous impaired driving conviction and had been suspended from driving in Ontario since 2003. Multiple charges were laid, and the vehicle was seized for 45 days. City News time is 10:31. I'm Chris Curries. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Should Aaron O'Toole lead the Conservative Party into the next election, or should it be someone else? And if it's someone else, give me a name. Who do you have in mind? Let's go to David in New Edinburgh. David, good morning. You're on City News.
Good morning.
Morning, David.
I think O'Toole's time is pretty much up. I just find that he's just now too saturated with negative and weakness. Say a fighter who's been beaten by a opponent he should have beat. If he's a good fighter, he can come back.
Okay.
But O'Toole's never proven to be a good fighter. So I think it's time for a change.
Time for a change? Do you have someone in mind, sir?
Well, it's too bad. It would be nice if Senator Batters could run.
Okay. All right. Okay. You're a fan all of a sudden, are you, David?
She sounded like she had everything together.
Right. Well,
her points were laid out just beautifully.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what's lacking in a voice of the Conservatives in the last few years. I think it does need to be a female.
Oh, really? Okay.
But the only one I can see is Michelle Rebel Garner.
Okay.
But she's a little bit, I don't know if she's refined enough for it.
Well, I think so. The question would be, how's her French? That would be a big question.
Yes,
right?
Yes, that's another. But the other thing is, in absolute terms, I would have to say Pierre Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre. Okay.
He didn't want to run last time.
Nope.
I thought, well, at least he's still in the party. But now the ship has sunk so low that he needs to save his ship. And I think he's the only one who can do that.
Very interesting. Okay, David. Thank you, David. Some interesting points there. Well, I'll tell you what. I was looking at this video yesterday. What stands out with this video is obviously some thought went into it. It's a pretty well done video, right? Some resources went into it. There's the kind of a logo there up in the upper left-hand corner that announces the petition and where you can sign the petition. Go visit this website. Then there's the very idea that there's a website. What does that suggest? Well, to me, it all suggests a certain amount of organization, a certain amount of planning, a certain amount of coordination, and dare I say, a certain amount of sophistication. It's not like Denise Batters woke up one morning, decided to grab her iPhone, stand in front of a water fountain, and say, I think Aaron O'Toole needs to go. It's not like a rogue senator with an iPhone. There's more behind it than that. And then you go to, so I went to the website. Membersvote.ca is the website. Membersvote.ca. When you go there, you can read the whole sermon again. These are all the reasons Aaron O'Toole is bad. And you can read it in both official languages. Yeah. All the complaints about Aaron O'Toole, they're in French, too. So, like, it doesn't leave you with the impression that it's all just the work of one disgruntled senator from Saskatchewan, right? There's more to it than that. And that's what makes this story from Global News so provocative. With the headline, Open Revolt, Open Revolt. Alex Bootler with the report. And it backs up my initial impression of this video that it's obviously a coordinated effort. It's not just one senator who never backed O'Toole to begin with. It's very juicy, this story that Global News has this morning. Just quoting here. A Saskatchewan senator's petition to force Aaron O'Toole to face a leadership review is part of a coordinated campaign to oust the Conservative leader. Sources tell Global News. It goes on. Multiple sources told Global News that Senator Batter's petition is part of a multi-step campaign that includes MPs and senators, as well as current and former party officials that want O'Toole gone after September's disappointing election results. This will unfold over the next 3 months, really over the next 6 months, said one Conservative MP who agreed to speak on the condition that they are not named. A second source corroborated the MP's account. So, David, what does that mean? There is plotting. There is scheming. And the leader has a big target on his back. Quote, there are a significant number of caucus members, as well as both past and current riding presidents and riding officials across the country, as well as former national councillors that are engaged in this, said the MP. O'Toole has been working to salvage his leadership after leading the Conservatives to 118 seats in September's general election, third straight loss against Trudeau's Liberals, end quote. And that is where we are this morning. 2 months almost since the election. And this is the state of the Conservative Party of Canada. Where's the Conservative Party of Canada today? Oh, it's in open revolt. Open revolt. Who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election? Aaron O'Toole or someone else? And if it's someone else, who is someone else, in your opinion? Give me a name. Leo in Ottawa. Leo.
Well, if you want to throw some fuel to the fire.
Yeah, sure.
Well, we always say people make comebacks. Well, Bob Chiarelli's making a comeback for our municipal election. So I would pick Stephen Harper.
Stephen Harper. Oh, you're going to dream big. Well, I'll tell you what, Leo. Stephen Harper.
That would really
I understand.
Fuel to the fire, I think.
I think so. It's not going to happen. It's in the news today that Stephen Harper is becoming a hedge fund manager.
Yeah.
With a partner who used to work with Carl Icahn, who's a famed investor on Wall Street. And according to the financial news today, Stephen Harper is going to manage a hedge fund. He's going to go from, like, policy wonk to MP to prime minister to hedge fund manager. So I don't think he's ever coming back to public office.
Well, then I have another choice then.
All right, okay.
Can I give you another choice?
Go right ahead, Leo. Sure. Speculation is fun. It's a lot of politics is speculation.
I think if there was another guy right now, and I mean, some people defy the defy it. Everybody has opinions and stuff. But I think the only guy for the job right now that I can see would be Pierre Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre. Yep, that's the name that keeps coming up. I think if there's anybody out there, and I know how he's hated by the Liberals, so they would love to have this fight. Mm-hmm. It'd be a good fight. But I think at the finish line, I think he'd cross the finish line first. Okay. All right. Thank you, Leo. Thank you.
All right.
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, though, that Harper he's been quiet on O'Toole's leadership, right? He doesn't tweet about it, doesn't really say anything about it, hasn't mentioned the election result. He hasn't said a word about the state of the party that he helped create. Maybe his silence speaks volumes. If you want to get rid of O'Toole, you must have someone else in mind. Who is that person for you? 750-1310, 750-1310. We have some lines available, and we have about 15 minutes here to take some calls. 750-1310, Rob Snow Show. Herntz in Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Very nice to hear from you. Thank you for a call.
My opinion, Mr. O'Toole should go.
You should go. Okay.
Yes,
all right.
But the person to replace him should be Peter MacKay.
Peter MacKay. And why do you say that, sir?
If Peter MacKay was the candidate, we wouldn't have this discussion this morning, because Peter MacKay would have won at least a minority government.
You think it'd be Prime Minister MacKay right now?
Prime Minister MacKay. Because in that convention, they made a mistake. They gang up on him and elected O'Toole.
Yes, there was kind of an anybody but MacKay movement going on during that convention, right? So
yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the way I see it. Peter MacKay is the man.
He's the man. Peter MacKay is the man. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Very good. Okay. Now, some conservatives, high-profile conservative MPs, many conservative MPs, they've been on social media in the last 18 hours or so, and they've been critical of this petition. They say it's not even legitimate. This is not even how conservatives, the party conducts itself. It's out of order. And they have been expressing support for the leader, Mr. O'Toole. And the message from these people is basically this: we must stay united. We must stop fighting amongst ourselves. We must take the fight to the Trudeau Liberals. We will never win as long as we keep this up. That all we're doing is making it easier for the Liberals. And as someone who's kind of more on the right side of things, who has great concern for some of the recent decisions by the Liberals, I most certainly go along with that line of thinking. Now, Michelle Rempel-Garner, the Conservative MP for Calgary-Nose Hill, she got things going on social media yesterday with a spirited and fierce criticism for this move from Senator Batters, first on Twitter and later on Facebook. We have the audio of the Facebook. Yes, we do. Let's roll tape on. Let's go into the Michelle Rempel-Garner metaverse. This is Facebook.
This is an open message to my colleague from the Senate, Denise Batters. Denise, I have been working all week on an issue that matters to my community. Denise, I have been meeting with dozens of stakeholders, talking to people from all across the country on how we should fight Justin Trudeau's war on the energy sector. That's what I've been doing this week. I can't believe I have to use my Facebook platform to do this, Denise. And so I'm about to do a bunch of media on this topic and show Canadians that as the official opposition, we're focused on Justin Trudeau. But you know what, Denise, I had to do this morning? I had to respond to your petition calling for a leadership review in the party. You know what that does to me? That clears my day from being able to stand up with my constituents. You know what it does? It's going to fill the news tonight with your petition, as opposed to my, trying to hold Justin Trudeau to account to get my community back to work. I'm so frustrated with this. You know, we can have differences internally in caucus. We can have vigorous policy debates. I'm happy to do that. That's good. That comes up with better public policy. But this open warfare that's happening right now, The Liberals are popping champagne to you. I'm sure that the Liberals went out and bought a case of champagne and they're going, cheers, Denise Batters. This is great.
They probably are.
So the media tonight, instead of talking about the energy sector or, the price of gas or the nation's debt being out of control, our colleague Pierre Poilievre did an excellent press conference yesterday talking about how inflation needs to be stopped and what we could be doing it. Are they going to be running that? Nope. They are going to be talking about this petition. And I am just so frustrated with this because we have to get it together. We're the opposition. And Justin Trudeau right now, because this is what's leading the news, is this, he gets a free ride today. His failures aren't leading the news tonight. No, it's our failures internally. And I just think that that's irresponsible. Okay, so right. I would like to get back.
You get the idea. You get the idea. Those are the key talking points from those in the Conservative fold and the Conservative caucus who, at this point, I think they want to put the election campaign to bed. They want to stop crying over spilled milk. They want to get on with the business as the official opposition of picking to pieces what the Liberals have planned for the country. And I can see that point of view as well. So that leads us back to our original question. Who should be leading this party into the next election? The Conservative Party of Canada, Aaron O'Toole, or someone else? And if it's someone else, who is it? 750-1310. This is City News.
The Rob.
So the birth of absinthe was 2002, I think, 2003, and I was working at Urban Bistro, Hubley, where Allan is now. And then the space where Holland Cafe was came up. It's on the corner of Spencer and Holland. And I spoke to the landlord, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of other people, but he and I just, got along super well, and he put a lot of faith in me. So Carmen Turner is his name. He gave me the lease to the place and really pretty much gave me all the equipment in the place. So I was really lucky. I've been really lucky with landlords that way, actually, both my current landlord and Carmen Turner. Because if there hadn't been Carmen Turner, there wouldn't have been absinthe. So we were there for a few years and just sort of outgrew the place. And then now we're here. It's obviously been tough, and it's been tough for everyone. I mean, that's the been the big democratic sweep of in restaurants and the hospitality and the arts that we were talking about earlier. It's like everybody's been impacted pretty much the same. From everybody that I talked to, we're down 80%. We're climbing out now. I think one of the saddest things is we went down to 2 employees from 25. And we're now at 4, and we're bringing 2 new people on this week, so we'll be at 6. So it's little steps. So it's been tough. It's I've got the most expensive clubhouse ever here because some days you come and you don't do any business, but you're here. But I'm grateful for what I do have. I think everybody's optimistic now, not necessarily just about the vaccine, but about the vaccine, spring, being able to be outside. I think you're going to see a lot of pop-up things happen in parking lots and on sidewalks and all and like that, rather than being actually inside somebody's commerce. I think we'd like to take it outside. I know my staff would. My staff like the outdoors now all of a sudden, all 4 of us. 6 soon. We'll be doing some business in the patio in the parking lot, and we have a patio out front. And I think I hope other restaurants and stores will do the same. I hope that they take advantage of the sidewalk and doing sort of, guerrilla marketing and stuff like that, and really shaking it up a bit. You can find us at Absinthe Cafe at 1208 Wellington Street West in Hintonburg. And you can find us online at absinthecafe.ca.
The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election? Aaron O'Toole or someone else? And if it's If it's someone else, who should it be, in your opinion? Reagan and Renfrew. Renfrew, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir.
I think I agree a lot with Michelle Rempel there. However, if we're going to be united, then why don't they help O'Toole straighten out his act?
Right.
But second of all, just to comment on McKay.
Yes.
He's, in my opinion, he's nothing without Harper. You know, he couldn't begin to do what he did with Harper. So I think he's out.
He's out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And of course, I firmly believe if we can't have Pierre Poilievre, it should be a woman.
Okay.
You know, and that's what I think. But yeah, I mean, it's division all over the place. But if we're ever going to get this to bed and quit the 5 cent bickering, then let's just change leaders.
All right.
And get somebody with a backbone.
All right, get someone with a backbone. All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, someone else, give me a name. You know, I'll throw out some names. I mean, because there are names that keep coming up whenever this issue has been in the news, and it's been in the news long before Justin Trudeau called the election, right? It's not like there weren't questions about O'Toole's leadership before the outcome of the election was known. Remember, prior to the election, the Conservative Party under O'Toole, worst polling ever. Like 25, 26, 27% support, lowest polling results since this version of the Conservative Party was formed. You know, so if it's not O'Toole, let's say, you know, you want someone else, you want to see the backside of O'Toole, who should be leading the Conservative Party? Poilievre. How many times does that guy's name come up? All the time. I'll tell you what, he's the ultimate parliamentary critic. He's great in that role, no question about it. But also, nobody would unite progressives more than Poilievre in their hatred of the man. A name that hasn't come up, that came up a lot during the leadership, was Leslyn Lewis. She wasn't named to O'Toole's shadow cabinet because of those comments that she made about vaccines and childhood vaccinations. Peter MacKay's name has come up. Should have been him the first time around, some people think. Rona Ambrose, would she come back? I don't think so. John Baird, would he come back? Oh, the dream. I don't know. But let's take some calls. About 5 minutes left here. Robert in Ottawa. Robert.
Hi there.
Hi, Robert. Who should lead the Conservative Party into the next election?
I know you just dismissed it a little, but my vote would have been for Rona Ambrose.
Sure, yeah.
Figure out some way of bringing her back.
Yeah.
I know she's off in the private sector now, but I always thought she had a lot of backbone, a lot of grit, and she's a woman, so I think she would have been a huge threat.
Yeah, she would have been a huge asset to the Conservative Party. She was a great interim leader as well. So, yep. Yeah, I'm with you. There's a lot to like about a candidacy like Rona Ambrose. I don't know. We're probably dreaming in Technicolor here, Robert, to think that would ever happen, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep, but thank you. Peter in Ottawa. Peter.
Rob, how are you?
Oh, hanging in there, Peter. How are you?
Hey, we're not complaining.
Glad to hear it.
I understand that you can't make everyone happy, and one leader is not going to make everyone happy. But the thing that should be reviewed, number one, is the Senate, if anything.
The Senate, okay.
It definitely needs to be reviewed, but let's put it that way. Aaron O'Toole is a good man. He served his country. He served his country with distinction.
Yep.
He's going to make a good leader, but everyone needs to rally behind somebody, and I think he's the man that they need to get behind. If anything, the right wing needs to get their act together and get behind this gentleman and let him run.
Okay.
Let him at least have one more shot at it. Who else are we going to pick? Like you said, all these people are not coming back. Why would they, first of all? Why would they come back? And
like Ambrose, Baird, Harper, certainly not. All probably out of the question. McKay, does he even want the job anymore? I don't know. He was certainly active during the election campaign. He was out stumping for Conservatives during the election campaign, but a good team guy.
And Poilievre, I mean, great theatrical politician, but not a leader. I'm sorry.
Not a leader. Why do you say that? Not a leader.
he's just not ready for this.
Not ready.
First of all, I don't think he wants it, and second of all, I don't think he'd ever win.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I think he might win a conservative leadership race. He might be very good at convincing conservatives to vote for him. But can he win a general election? I think that's the big question.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because he is such a turnoff to everybody who's in the non-conservative universe.
Exactly.
Right? They'll be unified in there. We can't have Poilievre as prime minister.
Right.
Yeah.
That's going to be a definite issue for sure.
Okay.
Aaron's a good man, and
he's a good man.
Knows what he's doing. Right. He's a politician. He's a patriot, an ex-vet. We need to get the comms people to put a strategy together, a proper strategy, and I'm sure he can win this.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye. And Paul in Kanata. Good morning, Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Paul.
I know this is a suggestion of a conservative leader that's apparently not going to work, but I like Lisa Raitt.
Lisa Raitt, sure.
Yeah, and I like how she talks.
Yeah.
This is, now mind you, I guess it's different when you're on the podium in the last week before an election. You have very guarded answers, but I'm really tired of these canned answers from both Trudeau and Aaron O'Toole towards the end there, where it's just like, we need somebody who can express themselves and not be afraid to take a stand. Like I felt actually that moment at the debate was a moment of shame in Canada when none of our leaders could stand up and say, you know what, I actually think that Quebec bill,
Bill 21,
it does have hints of racism.
Oh, it's state-sponsored racism, yeah.
Call it that, you know, and I'd call it in Alberta, I'd call it in Ontario, and I'll call it in Quebec. And if somebody had stood up and said that, you know, I think we just have kind of talking heads at this point. And unfortunately, I would put O'Toole in there. I think he got caught with a couple things like on the guns and COVID that were really, like, I'm just some guy in Kanata, but surely as a politician, you don't fall into that trap, right? There's no positive answer when you say you wouldn't ban the gun used in the École Polytechnique massacre, right?
Yeah. How do you not have a more, like, nuanced position on guns than what Aaron O'Toole had?
Yeah. Right. But anyway, I like Lisa Raitt, so there's a...
Lisa Raitt.
She's not interested.
Yep. We could always use more Cape Bretoners in politics at the highest levels. Paul, thank you. All right, good stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, coming up, more on this with Michael Taube, with a column in the National Post about Doug Ford and his wooing of the working class and rank-and-file union members. We'll get into both of those issues with Michael Taube. Syndicated columnist and former speechwriter for one Stephen Joseph Harper. The Senators' COVID protocol leads to the cancellation or postponement, better said, postponement of 3 games. So we'll get into that with Wayne Scanlan from Sportsnet.ca. James Powell, director of the Historical Society of Canada, had a great piece for Ottawa.citynews.ca on the Grieber report, the Grieber plan for Ottawa, which, for better or worse, has shaped the National Capital Region. And Monika with the latest out of the West Coast, the very wet West Coast. She's with City News Vancouver. This is City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, November the 16th. Good morning. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, 1 degree, some gusty winds. It's 2 degrees and mostly cloudy with a bit of sunshine in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. It's a day below 500 cases of COVID-19 across Ontario. This comes with 41 cases in Ottawa, 4 new cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 4 in Eastern Ontario. No new cases in Renfrew County. Our Alex Bloomfield with a provincial breakdown.
481 new cases, just enough to raise the 7-day average for a 16th straight day, but the rate of growth is really slowing now. It seems likely we'll actually start to see a decline before the end of the week. ICU occupancy was down 2 and still barely above last month's levels at 139. 1 new death reported and 13,000 more vaccinations, 4,700 of them first doses. Now, all of those numbers are province-wide. Alex Bloomfield, City News.
Now, following yesterday's Smiths Falls Town Council meeting, all employees would have to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or be placed on unpaid leave. Although the majority of council voted in favor of the motion, one councillor says he was not in favor of the new policy. Our City News reporter Prushka Gopalkista joins us with the details.
Councillor Christopher Maguire says that he's unclear how suspending an employee because they're not fully vaccinated would serve as a solution. He adds that while he understands why this policy is in place, Councillor Maguire says this policy is ideological.
It's certainly not the more compassionate option. I'm all for this policy when it becomes necessary, but at this time I just don't see that. I see this as being more ideological than evidence-based, and I really get uncomfortable with making a decision like this that's going to have a negative effect on people's employment.
If Smiths Falls employees are not willing to show proof of vaccination at least by early next year, then they'd be placed on unpaid leave until they've chosen to get both doses. Pirishka Gopalkista, City News.
Now, time for a check of your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud today before we get into that wet weather for tomorrow, that mixed precipitation. Our high today near 3 degrees. We'll have the wind out of the west-northwest tonight, partly cloudy and light wind, and a low -6. For today, the high +3.
City News time is 11:03. We're on day 5 of partial service for the light rail system, and as of now, no issues. So when will a full complement of trains be back on the Confederation line? Transit Chair Allan Hubley on the Rob Snow Show this morning on if he's confident that it will be by the end of this month.
Yes, I am. The testing is going well. We saw that last week, that they were able to sustain the service. So we felt comfortable enough putting people back on the trains, and we know that the testing continues and that more trains are in the queue to be approved for service, and so I can see it with the number of days left in the month.
There are currently 7 trains running on the east-west line. And this just into City News. Health Canada now has officially received a submission from Moderna to approve its COVID-19 vaccine for use among children ages 6 to 11. The department says it will now begin a review of the scientific evidence and data from the company's clinical trials. Health Canada says it will only authorize the use for children if its independent and thorough review shows the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risks in this age group. A review could take weeks or months. It comes as we await a decision from Health Canada on Pfizer's pediatric vaccine, which could come as early as this week. I'm Chris Curries for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, it's great to welcome back to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper, Michael Taube. Good morning.
Hey, Rob. How are you this morning?
I'm good. And you are like me. You are not actively going to seek the Conservative Party leadership. Okay.
No, I'm not.
No plots, no schemes afoot. No plots and schemes afoot. Okay. All right. But
nope.
There are, as you know, open revolt. What is your reaction to Senator Batter's petition to call for a leadership review of Erin O'Toole?
Well, since I'm not declaring my candidacy, I can actually talk about it openly, which is always nice. Yeah, look, I like Denise Batters. I've known her for a number of years. She's a nice woman. She's a loyal conservative. She certainly has the right to put this petition out. I just don't see the need for this, much the same way that when the knives came out for Andrew Scheer in 2019 after what was a difficult election result for Conservatives and a frustrating one, much like 2021 has been. I just think that, unfortunately, Conservatives by nature are recently taking their knives out too early when they don't get the result they exactly want. You know, the historical rule was a leader of a major party gets 2 kicks of the can or 2 elections to try to prove himself or herself and his or her ability to actually eventually, in this case, become the next prime minister of the country. Unfortunately, now, and maybe it's the times we're living in to some extent. Yeah. I think that is part of it, Rob. I think people just get frustrated at a moment's notice, and they're just ready to sort of wipe the slate clean, start with somebody new. And look, Senator Denise Batters is the first one to do it. It could have been anyone who had started off. We know that in the Conservative National Council, a fellow by the name of Bert Chen actually started that movement informally on his own, and he's been turfed out on what's now been declared, and this just came out recently. He's now suspended indefinitely from his position for, trying to disrupt the apple cart. Denise Batters, obviously, as a senator, is an unelected position. So it's really just a question of whether people want to discuss this or not and go through with what she's suggesting, that there should be a leadership review within 6 months. I think this is an internal party matter. I think it's for the party to make that decision, and I don't think we need to come out publicly and hold knives against one another, attack one another. It doesn't do the Conservative Party of Canada any good, period.
Yeah, I wonder, not being familiar with, say, the constitutional mechanics of how this would all work for the Conservative Party, but I mean, it's been almost 2 months since the election now. This is all that has consumed the media coverage for the Conservative Party, not an alternative vision for the country or an effective opposition to the current government, but rather all the turmoil. So I wonder, maybe you would know more about this than I would. Sure. If Aaron O'Toole can just say, okay, you want a leadership review? Let's have a leadership review. Let's do it today. Is there anything preventing him from doing that and just putting the matter to rest? Or?
Well, you can't necessarily do it today, but no, there's nothing preventing him from doing that if he wishes to. I mean, he can say that if it's the will of the membership to do so, he could obviously bypass any existing set of rules and say, then fine, we'll have it in 6 months. There's nothing that any political leader, a political leader of any other party cannot be stopped from doing that if they wish. But generally speaking, they don't, because they look at the last either leadership race or renewal of the leadership. Basically, when you go back to, say, a party convention, generally speaking, they reinforce or pass a motion to ensure that the leadership still has whatever the target number typically is. Each party is a little different, but let's say 80-85% of the party leadership, or 75% the bare minimum in some parties. If you have that support amongst the grassroots members, you're safe and you carry forward. Now, obviously, you want more rather than less. That's an obvious point. But at the same time, with Aaron O'Toole, again, when a party convention happens, I don't know what percentage of the membership is frustrated with him to the point that they want a leadership review or want him to step down, or how many Conservatives, generally speaking, who are paid-up party members, want to go through this so early. As you said, it's only been 2 months since the last federal election, and already we're starting at this level. But again, when Andrew Scheer, his downfall, it basically started within a couple months as well, 2 to 3 months. So it's not unusual to see it so early. I just don't think history needs to repeat itself on this, and it's not to any benefit. Yeah. If anything, it helps the Liberal Party with their weak and ineffective prime minister. It emboldens them and strengthens them, because they'll say that our main opposition is off fighting amongst themselves, which looks terrible. And the other left-leaning parties, they don't care. They can sit there, twiddle their thumbs, and watch the Conservatives, like Nero fiddles, while Rome burns.
Yeah, they do. They're making it easy for Mr. Trudeau, aren't they, Michael?
Far too easy. I know.
Yeah. So let's go through. Michael has had a column in recent days for the National Post, headlined "Doug Ford's Pitch to Union Workers isn't crazy, and it just might work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you're right that conservatives and the working class have had common ground from time to time. So give us some examples there, Michael.
Yeah, and it's in my piece, and again, it's sort of an issue of history. I think a lot of people just forget these things, not because they aren't bright, not because they aren't well educated, but just people are not immersed in this stuff the same way that, well, say I am. So I understand that people would forget it, especially in the modern age when conservatives and the working class or union leaders, union members, always seem to be at odds with one another. But if you go back historically, there's a lot of examples in Canada, the U.S., the UK, and other countries where they have worked together. I mean, some of the examples I used off the cuff are like the old Reform Party of Canada, at one point had ties directly to a lot of workers, and there was a lot of support from workers, especially out in BC. The left-wing publication This Magazine ran a piece about that way back in 1996, where they basically called it the union's dirty little secret. Nobody knew that about a third of union members in BC would naturally vote Reform, even if provincially they were still voting for the NDP. The old federal Progressive Conservative Party had ties directly. A lot of the left-leaning red Tories had links to union leaders and union members, and we did, that party did have supporters. The current Conservative Party, you can look at Aaron O'Toole, for example. One of his big pitches was to the working class. Remember, Mr. O'Toole comes from a blue-collar family. His father was involved in the auto industry for many years, both on the low levels and then eventually as a senior level. And, he understands that tie and how important it is. And then you can just start going through very quickly other examples, such as Boris Johnson in the UK, the current prime minister. One of his big pitches from One Nation conservatism, which is sort of a paternalistic view of conservatism that looks at traditions, families, etc. One of the big pitches as well is helping the working class. That's how One Nation conservatism has built itself, and that's why Mr. Johnson, in his last general election, did so well and won seats in areas where there was a heavy concentration of working class voters and places where the Conservative Party had not won seats for decades or ever. And finally, very quickly in the United States, same thing. There were union workers who voted for Dwight Eisenhower, to Ronald Reagan and others because they agreed with certain parts and principles of the agenda. So the tie does exist.
Yeah. And it's tapping into something that I think a lot of people view, say, some of the left-leaning parties, the New Democrats, Labor, whatever, that they have become more interested in, say, identity politics as opposed to maybe class politics. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but that Labor parties have abandoned the working class in favor of identity politics or climate change politics, these sorts of issues, right, Michael?
No, that's a very fair assessment. I mean, obviously there's many ways to look at that puzzle, but yes, that is true. And there are a lot of people who are older members who are, card-carrying union members, big supporters of big labor and whatnot, who are probably looking at the NDP or even their own unions at right now and are seeing things in terms of language, policies, issues that they're supporting, which have very little to do directly with what they used to be concerned about, which was the working class, conditions of the business itself, or working class conditions itself, the hours that they would work, pay scale, retirement fees, et cetera. That's what they think unions should be focusing on, and that's what unions did traditionally focus on. And that's where it sort of helps conservatives to some degree. Whereas, we know that obviously most people who are union members or most people who are working class are not inherently conservative, and many of them have never voted conservative and some never will. But the tie can exist and does exist, as I crafted, where conservatives like Ontario Premier Doug Ford, Aaron O'Toole, the Conservative Party leader. I mean, you can even go back to Donald Trump. Remember, the forgotten man and forgotten woman segment that was part of his campaign, a big part of it, Yeah, it did well, obviously, in the Rust Belt in the United States, but it was also an appeal directly to the working class, and it worked to some degree. If you use those things and you try to wrap up economic and political policies in things such as taxes, union rights, or just looking at ways to bring more people into the free market or the free market economy that would benefit them or help them, or just create more tax dollars in their pocket each year, which matters to a lot of union members, irrespective of which way their political leanings go, that's a way to try to rebuild this conservative working class relationship that has existed, whether some of the union leaders like it or not, for decades. And that's why Doug Ford was flanked by Smokey Thomas and Jerry Dias at one point. It's not because there's necessarily a lot of love between these three. In fact, there's quite a lot of love lost, especially between Ford and Dias. But when it came to something like the minimum wage going up to $15 an hour, and the reality that Doug Ford realized that one of the best ways to work out of this economic decline that we're currently in, caused by the enormous amount of money spent on CERB, the CEWS, and other things, a small increase in the minimum wage, yeah, it'll cost money, but it'll cost far less of the taps than anything that CERB and other things will do, which have brought huge amounts of debt to our country. Some for realistic reasons, and others because, unfortunately, these are just a sign of the times. So I think there is a lot of growth that is potentially there, Rob, and there are ways to do it. At the very least, you try, because if you just close doors everywhere where you can actually build relationships, you're never going to take government. And most importantly, no one is saying that the conservatives and the working class are going to work hand in hand on every issue. It's a question of whether you can build political and economic bridges to what would be regarded as unnatural allies and find a way to align themselves where a conservative leader like Doug Ford could hopefully get, with his sort of populist / small c conservative mentality, a foothold in some parts of the union membership or the working class in general, which could help him solidify his lead and ensure the next provincial election that he's still premier.
Michael Taube, always great to have your perspective on our show. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care.
Michael Taube. Read him, Troy Media, Loonie Politics, and This Week in the National Post. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I always knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well, because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think, probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products, like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website, because that was I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like, full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business at the same time, still get myself on the map because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Wayne Scanlan covers the Ottawa Senators for Sportsnet.ca, and he's here to give us the very latest on the Senators and their COVID problems. Now, 3 games postponed. Good morning, Wayne. Welcome back.
Morning, Rob. Nice to be here.
It's very nice to hear from you. What's the feeling around the club right now with how things are going with the postponement of these games and the toll that COVID has taken on the club?
I wish we knew the real toll, but I get the sense that it's been pretty chaos. It's been rather chaotic behind the scenes there. I mean, we only get glimpses. We can't go near the players. Obviously, we're getting Zoom access. It's kind of like going back to last year when COVID was raging and people weren't vaccinated. They were playing the games, but there were no practices. And I just can't imagine what these young players are going through, being tested multiple times a day. At times, guys are getting a positive, and then it maybe seems to be a false positive because they're testing negative, and they're going on and off the COVID protocols list. So I just think the mental and physical strain has been, I would think, enormous.
Yeah. Now, there is some thought that the NHL may have waited too long to make this decision to postpone these games, and that has been to the Sens' detriment. What do you think about that line of reasoning, Wayne?
Well, I do think it should have happened last week. It's the things that they look at, it's not just sort of health and safety. I mean, that's part of it. They're also looking at scheduling. You're quite aware, I'm sure, that's a condensed schedule this year. They're supposed to be going to the Olympic tournament, although when games start getting canceled, the NHL does have kind of an out clause if they don't want to participate in the Olympics, but that's a whole other story. But I think as the cases kept building last week, I mean, San Jose Sharks played through with 7 cases, but when Ottawa started to hit 7 and then 8 and then 9 and then 10, they finally pulled the plug at 10. But I think the logistics of having Western teams coming in here, you had the LA Kings, you had the Calgary Flames. Those games are pretty hard to reschedule just because of the travel involved. Okay. It gets a little bit easier now to, 3 regional games, a game in New Jersey on Tuesday, and then games here Thursday and Saturday, all postponed. And I think the travel to the U.S., the fact that they would have had to cross the border to play the New Jersey Devils tonight, I think that was a big factor.
So what will it take for the Senators to get back in action? Is there a threshold? Is there a standard? What has to be met here?
Well, we don't know. Practices and training are canceled until, quote, further notice, close quote. So whatever that means, I think they have to show signs that the spread is halted, that there are no more new cases, and that you start to get some bodies back. It's been, I'm sure, a week and a half since Austin Watson first tested positive. I think he was the first player. Matt Murray was pretty early on, and Nick Holden and players like that. Victor Mete and Josh Brown drove home from Boston after testing positive in Boston. So, I mean, that's how crazy this thing got. We had players across the border that couldn't fly home on a charter with the team. They had to drive home, the 2 COVID cases in a car and then go home and isolate. So it's been pretty wild, some of the circumstances of the past week and a half, and they just really want to put the fire out and start to get back and get healthy, and hopefully by the end of this week, they can practice, maybe by Thursday or Friday. I really don't know. Really depends on how things are doing, and then they're scheduled to play in Colorado next Monday, again, pending and making sure that things are better by then. And that's the start of a Western road swing next week. So you really have to have a lid on this before you send these guys out on the road for a week.
Yeah. To play in the National Hockey League, is there a vaccine mandate? Do you have to be fully vaccinated in order to play?
Most teams have been pretty good about getting all their players done.
Okay.
But there are cases. Bertuzzi in Detroit's not vaccinated and doesn't go across the border with the team. So playing home games only and road games in the U.S. So
are reporters allowed to know the vaccination status of the Ottawa players on the Ottawa Senators?
Well, we certainly asked. We asked Pierre Dorion right in training camp. One of the very first questions when he held a kind of the State of the Union in training camp before the season started, and said, "We're 100% vaccinated." Every player, every staff member. But, I think what we're seeing now is that this thing can spread with fully vaccinated people. And it was after that road trip. Ottawa went on a trip to Dallas and then Chicago and Minnesota in pretty short order. The Chicago-Minnesota games were back-to-back. And they started to test positive after those games. And there were positive cases, I know for sure, in Chicago and Minnesota at the time that they were visiting there. So, and now there's a Vegas player or two that's tested positive this week, and Vegas played Ottawa recently. So these guys are in very, very close physical contact. They're breathing heavily on each other. In some cases they're fighting. Yes. Imagine getting in a fight with Alex Formenton, and then you find out Formenton has tested positive. It's got to be very difficult for all the players. You think you're protected because you're double vaccinated, but really what you are is you're protected maybe from getting more severe symptoms.
Serious illness, right? And they're young professional athletes in the prime of their lives, right? So I guess the severity of is anything known about the severity of anyone's illness, or?
Well, yeah, DJ Smith said last week that everyone has some symptom. At that point, none of the players that had tested positive was asymptomatic. So they all had something, and it was varying degrees. But it's like heavy colds, I think, chest conditions and coughs and sniffles and that kind of thing. But, some of these players that are coming back, Ryan O'Reilly has come back, and he's played 5 games since coming off the COVID list. And, he was away for about 10 days, had a great month of October, and he's come back, and he's admitted it's affected his play. He doesn't have any points in the month of November. So, just getting these guys back and on the roster and on the ice again is one thing, but getting them really up to speed and feeling good physically and mentally, I think it could take a while.
Okay. All right. Wayne Scanlan, thank you so much for the update.
My pleasure, Rob. Anytime.
He covers the Ottawa Senators at Sportsnet.ca. That's Wayne Scanlan. We're back after the news on City News.
News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Tuesday, the 16th of November. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, partly cloudy, 2 degrees. It's 3 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. Breaking news from Health Canada, which has now received a second submission for a pediatric COVID vaccine. The official submission from Moderna seeks to use its mRNA vaccine in children, ages 6 to 11. Officials will now start poring over the scientific evidence and data from clinical trials before making a decision. That process could take weeks or months. Stay with City News for the latest on this developing story. The town of Smiths Falls has implemented a mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy. The mandate for staff approved by Town Council last night. It's set to go into effect early next year. The chair of Ottawa's Transit Commission says he's confident full O-Train service will resume by the end of the month. We're now on day 5 of partial service after the second derailment knocked out train service for nearly 2 months. A trivia fundraiser last night for the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa, and the amount raised was anything but trivial. More than 800 participants in the virtual event raised $53,000. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So City News at ottawa.citynews.ca, our website, ottawa.citynews.ca. We have a partnership with the Historical Society of Ottawa, bringing you a weekly feature by James Powell, Director, Historical Society of Ottawa, and highlights a moment in Ottawa's history. And this week, there is a very interesting write-up about the Grieber Report, or the Grieber Plan. And I encourage everyone to read it, ottawa.citynews.ca. And it's a great pleasure to welcome to our program James Powell. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me, Rob.
Well, it's very nice to hear from you. So tell me, first of all, who was Mr. Grieber?
His name was Jacques Grébert.
Grébert,
a French urban planner and architect. He was a member of what was called the City Beautiful movement, where a beautiful city is supposed to lead to a harmonious social order, which leads to improved quality of life. And he designed, among other things, he was the architect responsible for the 1937 Paris exhibition, at which he met Prime Minister Mackenzie King. And the two men hit it off very well. And Grébert was invited back to Ottawa to help plan government buildings along Wellington Street at the adjacent areas. Initially, that was in 1937, 1938. The only thing that was able to be done before the war was the National War Memorial, which was unveiled by the King and Queen in May of 1939. But after the war, he was invited back by Mackenzie King to hit a far larger project to develop and beautify the National Capital Region. He was a controversial choice because he was French, not Canadian, and it was over a 4-year period they put together a 300-page report on the Ottawa region with recommendations. And in that report, they looked at things like the physical geography, the history, the demographics, land use, housing, what public buildings were there and what was needed, transportation, hubs and development, tourism, things like that. And out of that exhaustive report came what's called the Grébert Plan for the National Capital Region. And this was seen as sort of a legacy for Mackenzie King. He had retired as Prime Minister in 1948. This came out in November of 1949. It was also dedicated as a memorial to World War II service people who died.
And in 1949, what would, if we think of the classic shots of Ottawa now, what would Ottawa have looked like in 1940?
Well, it was far from a green, pleasant city that we know today. It was really quite a grimy industrial city, heavily polluted as well. The Ottawa River was heavily polluted with lumber, sawdust, things like that. Ottawa is still very much of a lumber town, though that industry was declining. the whole along what's now Colonel By Drive, that beautiful boulevard, that was all train tracks going into Union Station, which is now being used as the temporary headquarters of the Senate. And there was actual like a 600-foot train shed before you got to the station. And if you look at pictures of the time, of the 1930s, it was a pretty grimy, industrial-looking area. And Jacques Gréber's idea was to help beautify the city.
To beautify the city, and a part of that meant getting rid of those train tracks,
That's right. He had a number of principal recommendations, these which they were controversial then, and some people now still find them or regret of those decisions. One was to relocate the railways, the yards, the warehouses out of the downtown core. And so that finally took place in, I think it was 1961, as the train tracks were pulled up along Colonel By Drive, and all that was converted into a parkway. And of course, the train station was transferred to Tremblay Road. The other things were to there'd be a green belt to stop urban sprawl.
Well, yeah, I would want to ask you about that.
That was a big one.
Yeah,
the idea was that communities would set up on the other side of the urban, the green belt, and they would be self-contained communities. Other things, there would be 2 new bridges across the Ottawa River, one at Lemieux Island, the other at Duck Island. The trolley lines that would be replaced because he thought they were very unsightly, he believed. The trolley lines in Ottawa had suffered from a lack of investment for at least 10 years, and they're pretty rickety at the time. So those were some of the main ones. Also, of course, the removal of the many temporary wartime buildings that littered the city, the expansion of Gatineau Park, and something that was really quite big idea was to have a huge war memorial at the southern point of the Gatineau Hills overlooking the Ottawa River. Of course, many of these...
On the Quebec side.
On the Quebec side. Okay. Of course, many of these things did not take place. Certainly that war memorial did not. Veterans much preferred the downtown war memorial right in the heart of the city as opposed to something out quite a distance. The 2 new bridges across the Ottawa River were not built. Never built. But the big things that were done was the relocation of the railways, the elimination of the trolleys, and the establishment of the green belt around the city. What
about Le Breton Flats?
He also recommended the redevelopment of areas close to to Parliament Hill that he considered urban blight, and certainly Le Breton Flats fell in that category. It had been rebuilt after the 1900 fire that leveled the whole area. And by the 1930s, 1940s, that area was pretty grimy. It did have, I know people talk about the sense of community that was there.
But people were kicked out, basically.
Yes, they were. They were. All that land was expropriated, and which was what happened next was even perhaps more unfortunate, that it was left fallow, that whole area, for at least another 30, 40 years before anything was done with it. But he did recommend cleaning up of the what he considered areas that were urban or blighted areas.
Yeah. It's interesting now, though, when there is development on Le Breton Flats, or development is even proposed for Le Breton Flats, you really do get the sense of the industrial heart of the city, because the land has to be remediated. That's right. So
that whole area was a mixture of residential and industrial buildings and sites, and the ground was heavily contaminated, and that was part of the reason for the delays and rebuilding of it, just one of many reasons. But yes, the city was very industrial at the time. The trolley line, the vehicles, the actual tram vehicles, were built here in Ottawa. There was actually at one point cars made in Ottawa. There was beer companies. There were paint companies. There was, of course, lots of lumber industries here. So this was not sort of the civil service, just the civil service, high-tech sort of green community that we know today. It was very much an industrial town with the capital, with the civil service on the side, as it were.
So with the Greenbelt, what was his vision there with the Greenbelt? Because as I understand it, I think I have read in the past that he really underestimated the population growth in Ottawa.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
He figured that the whole National Capital Region by 2020 would be maybe 500,000, 600,000 people. But in that region, of course, there's there's 1.4 million, I believe, is the most latest estimate. So he grossly underestimated that, and he had a very fond feeling towards the automobile. I don't think he had ever expected the number of cars to be on the roads. And of course, developers found that land on the other side of the Greenbelt was cheaper than closer to downtown. And so what you had was the suburban areas became bedroom communities for downtown. And so all these cars were added to the road with people traveling. So you'd have, in fact, it added more traffic congestion than what he had ever expected. He also thought that the railways broke up communities, that broke up the city, and that was one of the reasons why he wanted them out of downtown. But what they were replaced by, of course, major highways like the Queensway, which in itself breaks up the city. In fact, the Queensway was not supposed to be a highway. In his plan, it was supposed to have been a tree-lined boulevard. So there's many things that did not take place. There's a poor follow-through, by governments generally, opposition to many of the things that he suggested. But so there's only really a few major things that actually were followed through on.
What he thought with the Greenbelt would limit sprawl actually.
It contributed
promoted sprawl, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
and it's interesting now that we, in our own official plan now, is getting so much attention as it passed through council is, this idea of having a 15-minute neighborhood and the idea that maybe these bedroom communities wouldn't be part of sprawl, but would rather be, I think he envisioned them as their own little 15-minute communities.
He thought them as self-contained little communities.
So on the whole, because, 1949, trying to envision what Ottawa could look like by 2020 is, you're going to have to make some pretty grand assumptions there, right? So when you think about how he did in the end, what's the record?
Well, it's in the eye of the beholder. Firstly, it's difficult to know what the counterfactual would have been. Like, if he hadn't come up with the plan, I presume there would have been some plan at some point, but what would that plan look like? Or if there had been no plan, what would have happened? It's just hard to know. But yeah, I think there's a lot of regrets about not having a railway that enters downtown.
Yes, there is.
But at the same token, if it was there, it would have been, if Union Station was still being used as a station, I'm not quite sure. I think that Colonel By area would certainly not be a beautiful area that it is today. So I think it's sort of a mixed thing. I think he did really help to beautify the city or the area. I think I think most people agree that we live in a pretty nice area. Ottawa is a green and it's a pleasant place to live. And some of that, the Greenbelt being part of it, is attributable to his vision.
Very interesting. Yeah, it remains to this day one of the most maybe controversial reports ever on the National Capital Region. Right. Yes, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For walking us through it. James Powell, Historical Society of Ottawa, on the report by Jacques Grebert. The Graeber Report. 11:45. The latest out of Vancouver. Mudslides wreaking havoc in British Columbia. This is City News.
The food cupboard started about 25 years ago Again, it was a very small operation in the basement of a church. And we have been expanding to the point where we needed to have a new facility. So in discussion with the city of Ottawa, and Jan Harder, the local representative here, we came to this location, which is about 2,000 square feet, located in the Walter Baker Center. We've been here for about 2 years, and it is much better. It gives us a much broader opportunity to serve our clients better. It's a fairly affluent community in Barrhaven, so you wouldn't think that people would really need to have a food bank or a food cupboard. But people sometimes have a temporary loss of their job, maybe new immigrants or refugees to the community. Maybe there's been an injury in the family or something like a pandemic that causes people to run short of food during their monthly requirements. So we offer any clients who come and live in our catchment area the opportunity to pick up an order of food every 3 or 4 weeks. The need varies from time to time. We have expanded our offering to include quite a few perishables, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, vegetables, fruit. But people I think know that we need cans of beans and stuff as well too. One thing that we're consistently short of sometimes is personal hygiene products. You go to the grocery store, you buy your toothpaste and you buy your deodorant and shampoo there. People don't automatically think that to donate those kinds of things to a food cupboard. So we end up buying quite a few of those things from time to time. The pandemic has affected us like it has everybody. Initially, we had to stop the grocery store food donations so that we didn't have any risk of contamination and to have a significant number of volunteer work to be done in our facility. We have a storefront, so it's like a mini grocery store where you take a cart and you go around and pick out the things that you want. That doesn't work during the pandemic to maintain social distancing and so on. So what we have now is our clients can come in one at a time, they make an appointment, they stand behind a line, and they direct our volunteer to, I'd like Kellogg's cornflakes rather than Harvest Crunch, to pick the food that they would like off the shelves according to the allocation, depending on the size of their family. And then they take it out, load it into their vehicle or whatever, bring back the cart, we disinfect everything, and prepare for the next client. We are very blessed here in Barrhaven. We're a totally volunteer organization. So if you give a dollar to us, it goes to purchasing food or to provide some service to our clients.
Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
So let's go to our colleagues at City News Vancouver now and get the very latest on what is happening with rescue efforts, flooding, and the devastation from these powerful storms. From City News Vancouver this morning, we are joined from the newsroom there by Monika Gould. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. You're in Action Central there this morning. What is the latest on people who have either been rescued or remain trapped on various highways throughout the West Coast in the sections that have been hard hit by these storms?
Right. Well, one area where we had a lot of people trapped is Highway 7 here between two smaller communities called Hope and Agassiz. It was a highway that many people, when things were really, getting more desperate, people were kind of going off on this highway Sunday night trying to either get into the city, Vancouver area, or get into BC's interior. And two landslides essentially got a few hundred people stuck in between these two communities. And yesterday, throughout the day, helicopters were going in and out, getting these people out. 275 people were taken out of this highway, including 50 children. So those people are now safe. They're taking sort of refuge in other nearby communities. But we do still have many people, hundreds of people, sort of stuck in the community of Hope. This is a smaller community that's sort of in between the Metro Vancouver area and BC's interior. And all the highways in and out are either washed out by floodwaters or covered by a mud or rock slide. And, it's tough to say how many people exactly are there that are stuck, but hundreds, either sleeping in their car for a second night just this past night, either taking shelter in a school or a campground that's taken in a few hundred people. But those people are luckily sort of safe. They are in the community. They're able to get shelter and food. So as it stands, it doesn't seem like we have any more people actually sort of stranded on a highway, actually stuck without access to, a washroom, food. But there are just people displaced throughout different parts of the province.
And overnight, what's the weather been like? If you're stuck in a car on a highway, has it been quite cold or around freezing? What are the temperatures been like for people going through that?
It varies, but I mean, like in Hope, checking the weather right now, it's about 5 degrees, but there
5 degrees.
is 5 degrees, and overnight it does get quite cooler. I mean, this is definitely the areas, closer to the BC interior where you have those upper elevation highways, or you're close to those upper elevation highways. It does get pretty cold. I mean, snow can just kind of come out of nowhere in some of these areas. Luckily, it doesn't seem like people are really, stuck in these extreme elements, but I mean, even in Hope alone, it's not warm. And keep in mind, many people were totally caught off guard by this. You're always told to, especially in BC, if you're kind of traveling along some of these highways, you're always told to prepare and bring, a blanket with you, an emergency pack of some sort. But it is one of those things. Not everyone ends up, doing this. I know I've been guilty of driving through some of these highways without some of this stuff that's so crucial. So it's definitely not been an enjoyable experience for many of these people.
Metro Vancouver completely cut off from direct road access to the rest of the province. What is the latest on that? You can't get in and out of Metro Vancouver right now.
No, unless you count the states, but that comes with its own other problems.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, essentially every highway in and out of Metro Vancouver area is closed, and we even have these like crucial main ones that are in between communities. This main highway, Highway 1, is sort of completely blocked off between Abbotsford and Chilliwack. Abbotsford is an area just about an hour outside of the city of Vancouver where they are seeing extreme flooding. A few hundred people were actually put on evacuation order this morning, and that's because that main highway, I mean, you see pictures online and it's just like complete lake. You can't even see where the road used to be. It's just all covered in water. In terms of when some of these highways will reopen, it's anyone's guess at this time. I think the province is still assessing the situation. I mean, some of the water levels are still rising, for example, in Abbotsford, where more people were evacuated. So until those waters start receding, and until in those other areas where highways have been closed by mudslides, until they can go in and assess, actually, it doesn't look like some of these highways will be opening anytime soon.
What is the latest that you're hearing out of Merritt?
I mean, Merritt, there are a lot of people who have remained in the community, but as your listeners probably know, the whole city was put under an evacuation order yesterday after the water treatment system essentially failed. It's a community of a few dozen people. But people have remained as well. I know it was a hectic evacuation yesterday. One person I spoke to as they were getting out, they actually got caught up in a blizzard. Once again, these are some of these highways that we're talking about. The highways in and out of Merritt, they're upper elevation areas where snow can kind of come out of nowhere. So one person who I spoke to said they did get caught up in a blizzard as they were trying to evacuate their, community that's flooding. Not clear yet when people will be allowed back in there.
Yeah, but that's a town of about 7,000 people, and the whole town was ordered to be evacuated. Like, everybody, get out. Right. And
this is also a community that throughout the summer had evacuation orders for certain neighborhoods because of wildfires. Many will remember the community of Lytton, which burned down over the summer. Lots of people ended up finding themselves in Merritt. So it's just been such a rough few months for many people in that community.
Okay. Thank you so much for the update.
Thank you.
Very good to hear from you. Yep. That is Monika Gould. She is with CityNews 1130 in Vancouver, where it has just been an extraordinary week, and it's far from over there for our friends in Vancouver and some of those surrounding areas. Atmospheric river is what started it all. A term I have to admit I had never even heard until this week. An atmospheric river that sparked the storm that has caused so much destruction across British Columbia. Vancouver, more than about 120 millimeters of rain since the weekend. It just started and it didn't stop. High winds as well. Abbotsford, something like 180 millimeters of rain in 2.5 days. 225. She mentioned Hope, British Columbia. Chris Sims, you remember Chris Sims works for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. That's where she's from, is Hope, British Columbia. Her parents are from Hope, British Columbia. 225 millimeters of rain since Saturday. 225 millimeters of rain. We're talking like what would normally be, even in wet parts of British Columbia, that would be a month's worth of rain. And Merritt, 7,000 people. People told on a moment's notice, you have to get out. You have to evacuate. 7,000, a town of 7,000 people. A town bigger than the size of Almont. So we're following that. We'll be following that all week. This is the Rob Snow Show. Sam LaPrade is coming up with the Sam LaPrade Show right after the noon news here on City News.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.